Hello, welcome to episode 209 of the Crate and Crowbar. It is the 2nd of October 2017. My name is Chris Thurston, and tonight I'm joined by Tom Senior.
Hello.
And Tom Francis.
Hello.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So formal.
Yeah, it was very
It's
formal.
like a schoolroom or something.
Yeah. Here. Tonight we're going to talk about plunk bag problems. Are we? Yes.
Briefly.
Yes, briefly. Not that's the only thing we're going to talk about. But, I didn't know how to segue out of formal intro into news, so I just decided to do it weirdly.
It's a 3-hour Plunkbat server trouble special.
Oh, wow, yeah. Sorry, yes, this was going to be a lock-in, but you were locked in with 3 hours of hot latency chat. No, everyone's favourite game, the most popular game in the world, I think. That's probably not
right.
It's not true, probably.
That was probably a MMO in China, isn't it?
Yeah.
Has more players.
PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds has had a bit of a week of controversy.
Yeah, it's had 10,000 negative reviews in the last day, I think.
Jesus Christ.
Which is like, that would be an astronomical number of views to have in total of your lifetime after 10 years.
Did they kill a child?
No, but players in China are seeing in-game ads.
Oh my God.
And they're seeing in-game ads for VPN services that let you connect to non-Chinese Plunkbat servers.
Huh.
So they're doubly annoyed about this because A, it's in-game advertising for a thing they paid for, and B, the reason that's even a service that people offer is that the Chinese servers are really slow, or there's something to do with the Chinese servers that makes performance poor, and so they feel like they paid for a game and now they're also being advertised on a way to make that game now run well, or have less lag.
Now, there's a really weird situation, because when I was out in China recently, something I was talking to people about was that latency and connecting to servers outside China is an issue that can curtail the success of an online game in China, specifically because the government controls that traffic, and you require a partner with a Chinese distributor in order to have your servers in China and so on. It seems really dodgy to have like your servers in China with a Chinese partner and then the service advertised in the game that gets you around that, presumably. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a thing where the Blue Hole are intentionally advertising that particular service to players because they know it will sell, or if it's just a thing where there's an ad slot and the people who happen to have bought the ad space is a company who very sensibly think their market might be Plunkbat players since they sell a service for that.
Didn't they separate the game out into a different company recently?
Yeah. I think it's just like a subsidiary though, right?
Oh, right, so
it didn't go
it's just an
independent.
organisational thing.
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, unless they are trying to get around some regulation, finding a bloop hole.
This is definitely one of the things we don't know enough about to talk
No,
about.
the other issue that people have been cross about is latency. The game has suffered quite a lot lately. It's kind of a miracle it didn't suffer sooner, given how explosively successful it was.
Yeah.
People not being able to connect at all, that kind of thing. I don't know enough about this because, again, we don't know enough about any of this. But I wonder to what extent it's like when a game sells that much and gets that big, what would be, an issue affecting a handful of people becomes naturally an issue affecting loads of people.
I was interested actually. I looked into this just because the only reason I know anything about this topic is because I happened to have read PC Gamer's article just before I came out, and I saw the headline that they had 10,000 negative reviews in this space of time, and I clicked through to find out what does that make its overall score. Like, is 10,000 an incredible amount for a normal game? Is it like a drop in the ocean for Plunkbat? And in particular, I was interested in on Steam. It separates out recent reviews and overall reviews. And I was like, well, recent reviews are going to be mixed as fuck. But has that brought the overall thing down into mixed territory? And the answer is yes, the overall reviews are mixed. But numerically, no, it can't be just the 10,000 that it just got. It must have already been fairly low. Or it can't have been like overwhelmingly positive or anything. Because it's got like something like 150,000 reviews or something. So 10,000 negatives is bad, but it could put it down one bracket, but it's not going to go from like super positive to mixed in that space of time. So I think I actually used Steam's new histogram feature, which was roundly mocked in the press, but it was quite useful in this case to see that, there's a massive load of negative reviews today, and but also historically there's sort of like, it looked about sort of 20% negative reviews, like 20% negative, 80% positive, and then worse on some days for some reason. But yeah, that was kind of interesting.
How do you feel this? Because, I mean, the Steam histogram feature, which is, just to clarify, is sort of the ability to see review distribution over time.
Yeah, user reviews.
Yeah.
And it's for spotting review bombing. It was Valve's answer to the review bombing problem. Not their final answer, just the step that they chose to take at the time. So that when review bombing happens, you can at least see, this is a review bomb. This is not a long-standing problem with the game. This has happened recently, and then you can click a button either to ignore those reviews or only look at those reviews because you want to read them and find out what the issue is. But if the issue is something that only affects Chinese players, you're going to read a lot of Chinese reviews. If you don't speak Chinese, you might infer, this is something I should say Tom Hatfield pointed this out on Twitter, that if all the negative reviews are in Chinese, then that's makes it tricky to figure out what the problem is. You might infer that it's something to do with the Chinese, so something that mainly affects Chinese players. But of course, that it would get a lot stickier if it was if there was something that affected all of Europe. There would be loads of reviews in all kinds of languages, and it might be difficult to find any English ones if you only spoke English. And it's not safe to assume, the negative reviews are in a foreign language, therefore this issue doesn't affect me.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think that system, as a first step, fine, but it doesn't. I know we had a discussion about this a couple of months ago on the pod, but I don't know if I'm comfortable with review bombing being a thing that's possible in Steam, because I sort of half understand it as a way where consumers feel they have no other way of communicating with the developer. It's a way to kind of forcibly make a noise. But given that it can be basically used for any reason you want to basically bully a developer, essentially. That is the reflex that it enables regardless. And I wonder if the solution to something like this is to have reviews be something that players are invited to do. I was thinking about this the other day, relevant to this issue, because when you get an app on your phone, it's constantly popping up telling you to rate it. And there's a reason it does that, because it's looking for iTunes ratings or whatever App Store ratings that will help it rank. But the notion of Steam every now and then saying we'll give you a little voucher if you go through a little list of games and review 2 of them, and you have a time limited slot in which to do that, and that's when you get to leave a user review, and if you don't do it during that time, you have to wait for the next time you're invited, I think would solve this problem. I'm kind of putting that out there as a sort of what are the obvious problems with that.
So one is that when you give incentives for these things, people tend to phone it in to an extreme extent, so they can just type in any old garbage to get the reward. We saw this with when Valve did the treasure hunt type thing, where you had to get to get your community badge, you've got to do a certain number of activities on Steam, and one of them is comment on someone's profile, and so everyone's profile has this one garbage comment from someone just saying, I have to do this to get a badge.
The other thing is people who are motivated enough to comment, whatever we think of their complaint, that complaint's legitimate enough to them to go to the time of actually expressing that.
It's tricky because the distinction you want to have is, I as someone browsing Steam, when this happened is not really the important information. It's, is this a problem with the game, or are you angry at the developer for something outside the game? And Valve touched on this in their post about this. They sort of see that as a problem, because it kicked off around the time of the Camposanto PewDiePie thing, where Camposanto were pissed off at PewDiePie for something he said, and therefore issued a DMCA takedown for his video of their game, and that caused PewDiePie's audience to be pissed off at Camposanto, and then to review bomb Firewatch. And so the review bombing had nothing to do with the quality of the game. People, I read some of those reviews, and they were talking about the quality of the game but it was people who've come here now to suddenly announce they don't like the game because of something else that's happening. And so that, to me, as a user, that's completely different to the Plunkbat thing, where if they'd added like in-game ads to the game in my region, I would want to know about that. And if it's causing a huge negative effect, it probably does represent something about how I'll feel about the game. But you can't split them. Like if the naive solution would be like, oh, we'll just have it when you write reviews. Ask them, are you talking about the game itself or something? And of course, everyone would just say the game, no matter what.
And are you writing this because you individually felt that it was important personally to write this, or are you writing this because people on Reddit thought that it would be good if we all did this?
Is there a mandatory time of played that you have to acquire before posting a review on Steam?
No, but it does tell you. It does show you that. It does show that on your profile. I think you have to own the game. Yeah, I actually don't know. I answered that without actually knowing the truth. Just jumped right in there.
Because if everyone had to spend an hour in the game before they're allowed to post anything about it.
Also, yeah, the problem with that is then if the reason that they want to complain about it is because it didn't work at all.
Yeah. But you can say
that's a legit.
Well, maybe have it so that if you can't leave a review until the refund window has expired, because if you hit a big problem and you refund it, then your commercial risk has been assuaged.
Yeah.
And then maybe have some kind of system where you can see how many people have chosen to refund a game. And, maybe with some sort of exit comments and people who've mass refunded a game saying it doesn't work at all, that kind of thing, within the first hour, it wouldn't even boot, that kind of thing. And that's separate to reviews, which are only for people who have stuck with the game past the, past the point where you can't seek a refund anymore.
Yeah, that's not a bad solution. By itself, restricting reviews to the refund after the refund window would obviously leave a loophole for scammers who creating bullshit games that look appealing because there'd be this lag before the negative reviews ever came up. But yeah, like you say, if you could show refund statistics as well, that would help. I can't remember what the other thing I was going to say about this was. The thing I thought was when I was reading Valve's post on this, they're explaining their histogram solution and has the option to exclude those reviews. I can't help thinking that it would be worth, if you can detect it reliably, and it seems like you can, when there's a spike of this magnitude, I can't help thinking it would be good to just exclude those from the overall percentage and still flag it up, say, a high volume of negative reviews, click here for more information or whatever, but the overall percentage would not change. And then if it goes back afterwards, because they were saying in general over time these things, if it is just a controversy rather than an actual problem with the game, then the review score kind of stabilizes. But it's eventually, and if it's a big dip, it could take a long time to get out of. It might be quick to get out of the mixed category, but it would be a long time before you're back at where you were. Any kind of law of averages thing takes a very long time for it to balance out, because you don't necessarily get a counteracting positive effect. You might just get the same ratio you're getting. If you're a 70% positive before and then you get 10,000 negative reviews suddenly, it could take a long time for that 70% to add up to you getting back to 70%. It's going to be 50% for a long time. It's going to be 60% for a long time. And so I can't help thinking that you should, if it is just a blip, then it should exclude it from the long-term review percentage. But obviously, if it stays negative for a long time, then it probably is something to do with the game, because it's hard to imagine sort of people endlessly review bombing over an out-of-game controversy. It's more likely to be real players if it's a lasting problem.
Yeah, maybe the solution there is when a extremely high volume or a dramatic shift in the number of negative reviews occurs, it just delays calculating the average for a week, basically, and then so the average doesn't get updated for a while, and as you say, there's a little flag that says something's going on, but Steambot can't decide whether it's legitimate consumer complaints or a controversy. It's such a weird thing to have to design against, but yeah.
Also, with your review refunds idea, where sort of ability to review is delayed until you're eligible for a refund, but refund information is also public, you could let them review it then and there, but you just don't count that towards the percentage until that window's up, because they do that for off Steam purchases. If you get the game via a Steam key from elsewhere, you can review it and people can read your review. It will be there on the page, but it won't be factored into the overall percentage because I can't remember what the rationale for that actually was, but I think people were just giving away keys in exchange for positive reviews to game the system.
Do you think this is a worry for Plunkbag, this sort of thing? I doubt it.
Its success is so Titanic at this point that, if it never sold another
and
copy,
God knows, you can't sink a Titanic.
Yeah, perhaps the wrong metaphor there.
Yeah, the other announcement was that it's now not being... It's got a new dev studio assigned to it. I mean, out of the existing developers, but they are now PUBG team, which is helpful.
PUBG team.
PUBG team.
Yeah, it was always like... It was a company sort of hiring the Plunkback guy, right? That made this... I mean, he wasn't the Plunkback guy at the time, but player unknown.
He was just a plunk.
He was, if you will, an unknown player, and it sounded like that they sort of hired him and gave him a team and said, "Hey, do that as a game," and that's a different thing to him founding a studio of his own and making that game. And so this possibility of corporate overlords who make business decisions that may be extremely profitable but not that great for the people who care about the game. Was always looming, and perhaps this is it.
They said something in the statement, something dry and businessy, like we're here to make sure that the future of the PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds global brand is kind of properly managed.
Ah,
I know it's a real
cuddly.
Yeah, it's a real 0 to millions of dollars story, but it just maybe like realize that there's probably gonna be a Battlegrounds movie, and that's gonna
weird full circle.
Like
that'd be strange.
Yeah, someone make a game of it.
Which is going to be Battle Royale, but everyone's going to be in very boring grey t-shirts.
I think it's going to be the I was going to say, like, because there hasn't been like a sort of American teen remake of Battle Royale. Which there is for a lot of Japanese horror movies, for example, right?
Yeah.
If you see Battle Royale as kind of a horror, it is a kind of horror movie, really, more than an action movie.
Yeah.
Like that, it hasn't had its like Ashton Kutcher in Battle Royale. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe this will be that. That's because given that Plunkbag's styling is kind of like tribal tattoo arseholes in a big plane.
I never really got that impression from it. Everyone's just like incredibly blandly dressed. That's what's the weird thing about it. Like,
yeah,
like,
I think it's the logo. I think it's just the sort of the logo and the ultimate life or death battle thing that makes me think of tribal tattoos for some reason. There aren't loads of tribal tattoos in it. It's just of a kind. I suppose maybe Hunger Games was the American Battle Royale. But
yeah, sure. It came from like its own novel series of like. It's almost it's a dystopian fiction, I guess. Like so, it's Royale, actually.
Yeah,
it's all the same.
But I mean,
and I think the Hunger Games sort of kickstarted this generation of games about that stuff as well. Which
Hunger Games mods for Minecraft were a big factor in this. So it's the circle of life. But yeah, no, there's going to be a Battlegrounds movie. I can feel it now. I can feel it. It's going to be shit.
There's been another massive commercial success in recent video games.
That's a good segue, Tom.
Cuphead has sold 100,000 copies, and I think it came out last night, didn't it? Or was it a day ago?
A couple of days ago.
Like,
Friday.
That was fucking fast.
So Cuphead is the game that the incredible looking 2D platformer boss rush game, which looks like a cartoon from the 30s, basically. Yeah. And it looks phenomenal.
The degree to which they've nailed that precise drawing style and animation style is unbelievable. Like I'd put like surely most of those sales down to the extraordinary way it looks like no other game.
I bought it knowing I wouldn't like it, and I played it for 10 minutes and I don't like it, but God, is it gorgeous.
What is the root of your not liking it?
It's an extremely hardcore, extremely difficult shoot 'em up in which when you die, as far as I played, I was just reset all the way back to the start of the level. There was there may be checkpoints later on, but I didn't get as far as one. And so every time I died, I lost all the progress I'd made. And that was infuriating. And I knew it would be. Like, I could tell they didn't missell the game to me at all. I'd definitely been told it was a hardcore, brutally difficult platformer. I know I didn't like those, but I was so curious about the art style that I bought it anyway. And I'm glad I sort of saw it, like just the presentation as well. Like it's got quite a lot of different modes you go through before you play the game. There's like, title cards, and then a main menu, and then an intro, and then a sort of bit where you're in someone's house and talking to them, and then there's an overworld, and then there's a shop, and then you get there's tutorial is in there somewhere. I can't remember where in that order it comes. And then you get to level 1, and level 1 was when I realized, oh no, not for me.
It's kind of a shame.
I wonder. I'm curious because I mean, there's no mystery to its sales because hey, I, a person knowing I wouldn't like the game, bought it. But I do wonder if it's. It feels like the visuals have a very broad appeal. Like they're nostalgic, but they're nostalgic for a thing that's probably 90% of the people. Well, nearly 100% of the people buying it did not experience at the time, right?
Yeah. No,
safe to say, long
bet.
before my time. And so I think it's just generally appealing. I think the appeal is very broad of that visual style, and loads of people are like, oh my god, look at that looks amazing. And I don't know if the appeal of the gameplay is broad. It's outside of what I like, but then Super Meat Boy is a massive success, and that's also basically the same kind of reaction to that.
I think Super Meat Boy had some stuff like cushioning mechanics, like the instant restart and the fast-paced levels.
Yeah.
Kind of they cushion that difficulty. Whereas it feels like Cuphead is like really old school shmup design, where it's just you just have to memorize every formation of enemies coming in and just know what's going to happen before it does.
Mark Brown posted a GIF on Twitter that was a time lapse of, I assume, him fighting one of the bosses in the game, and said this will tell you whether you're going to like Cuphead or not. And I think that's probably true because I watched it, and at that time I'd already bought and played the game, so I knew, but it would have been enough to tell me not to buy the game. It was just it's time lapse, so you don't see like a lot of specifics. You don't really know what the player is dealing with in terms of difficulty, but you can see when that enemy shows up, he dies, and then when he goes back to the start, and then he does it again, and then like that enemy shows up, and he dies, and then he dies, and he dies, and then he defeats that enemy, he gets the next enemy, and he dies, and then it's that again and again and again until he gets to like phase 3, and phase 3 is very visually different. So even in a time lapse, you really spot that every time, and you see he gets to phase 3 like a couple of times, and then for a while he doesn't get to phase 2 again for a long time, and then it's like 10 more attempts at phase 3 before he ever gets through it, and I'm just like, oh my god. I would be punching the screen.
I guess with that difficulty thing, like it just gates all that artwork off is always the
that's the thing. I would
it?
if it had, I know they would never do this, but if it had like a tourism mode that I could just kind of blast through.
Well, I was going to bring that up because like they just announced that Assassin's Creed Origins. It's
hard not to say Origins.
Will have a tourism mode.
Yeah, it's like a museum mode or something. Do they call it?
Yeah, just go for a walk in Egypt.
Yeah, it's called Discovery Tour. I was at the press event where they showed it to us.
Oh, really?
And they only showed us like a couple of minutes of it. But it sounds brilliant. It's really, really cool. And you pick your character, if you want to be Julius Caesar or Cleopatra or one of the characters from the game, and then you wander around, you pick a tour, and it might be like a 20-minute tour that shows you like evisceration protocols in ancient Egypt. And the clip they showed was of the main character looking at a body being eviscerated with the hooks pulling brains out. It wasn't graphic, like it was just like a
really
somehow it wasn't. It was like a mannequin being operated on, but with no like bits or blood or anything really. So they've clearly toned it down, taken all the murder out of it, and then just like giving you passages of voiced text over these little animations that describe to you some of the processes and cultures of ancient Egypt, and then you walk to the next bit, and I don't know whether it's going to be like on the left you've got the pyramids of Giza, and now on the right you've got some dudes.
The right of Giza.
But yeah, it's a lovely idea, and they say it came from teachers telling them that they somehow used earlier Assassin's Creed games in lessons.
I heard that as well.
Yeah.
I was in Italy last week visiting a whole bunch of Italian developers, including Ubisoft Milan. But apparently, on a completely unrelated conversation with, I think, like the deputy mayor of culture for Milan was saying that one of the things kind of changing the stigma associated with games in Italy is the fact that Assassin's Creed's been used in schools. Because its depictions of Renaissance Italy are like pretty good, like obviously not accurate, because at no point did a magic man hang glide off after like an Ottoman prince in order to rescue a magic egg, but broadly speaking its depictions of the time really high fidelity, so they have value. But you can just imagine the teachers kind of like
dispatching guards.
Yeah, exactly.
Just one moment, kids. Let's take all these roof guards out, and then we're going to go and see some cool shit.
Yeah, that's really cool because they always had the sense that I guess I kind of knew that they put like so much more effort into the historical side of this than I'm appreciating, because as you point out, the overall effect is not a realistic depiction of what was going on there, but I could tell there's like work has gone into making parts of this authentic, and I'd just like to be told which bits are authentic, like how much of this is true, like even just the fact that I think when I first played, I didn't know that all of the targets are real people who were assassinated.
They've always it's been variously hidden in various ways, like perhaps too hidden, given that you didn't know it's there. But there's always a database in Assassin's Creed games where if you walk past a monument, you can just look at it and click on it, and it'll give you the actual history of the thing.
Yeah,
and the same exists for characters, and there's actually a whole codex inside the game.
Yeah, it's like a codex for real lore, or as it's actually called, history. Yeah,
the best lore of all.
Yeah,
I liked. The newer Tomb Raider games sort of took some steps in this direction where when you found the collectibles were sort of trinkets, and when you found them, you were prompted to press a button to sort of examine them in your inventory, and Lara would just sort of say some stuff she knows about it and where it came from and what it meant and how it was used in the society it came from. I don't think they went very far with that, but that's something you could have gone much further with. If you've, there's a podcast called History of the World in 100 Objects or something, podcast voice about a podcast. And that's an amazing delve into just pick one object. You can't see the object because it's a podcast, but just describing how that fit into history and its context. If Lara Croft could do that every time you find a collectible, that'd be great. Just a good half-hour episode on everything that object meant. And I've since played Uncharted, and that also has what's the word I'm looking for? Artifacts, I guess. That I think are mostly based on real items. But it tells you fucking nothing. You just find them, you can rotate them in your inventory, that's it. No information whatsoever.
I remember the last Tomb Raider game, you'd read some text off a wall, and you'd learn like 20% of the language.
Yeah, that was great. Her way of learning language is look at it for a while, like, oh yeah, I know 10% more now.
Well, I have 80% Greek, and now I've looked at this, and I'm up to 100.
But yeah, I don't think there's any harm to Cuphead of approaching it in that way. Like, I wonder, because clearly a shitload of people are willing to buy it off presumably hype, right? I'm guessing hype. It's reviewing well,
yeah,
but like it was extremely hyped, and I think the reason it was extremely hyped is because it made such a big impression at the E3 where it debuted, because it looked unlike anything else. Deservedly so. People get really excited, but it feels like, and there's no requirement on those developers to subsequently make a game as populist as that, that is populist in sync with their popularity, right? Like it feels like it was more popular than the number of people who will probably really love it for what it is, I'm guessing.
Well,
unless there's an underserved audience for super hardcore
or it inducts new people into that genre, basically, because you want to see the art so much, you actually learn to persevere and actually learn how to deal with that type of hard game, and maybe like a percentage of those people get really into that and go play Ikaruga, and it will be even worse.
But this is what I'm saying, right? Like, once upon a time you could kind of gatekeep those experiences in that way, and seeing the end of Ikaruga was your reward for seeing the beginning of Ikaruga a million times.
It was all lasers,
right?
Like, it's not like Cuphead as a reward, I don't think, in terms of.
But nonetheless,
like,
it's even almost the principle of the thing, right? Like, I've earned the right to see Act 5 or something because I've seen Act 1 100 times, Act 2 60 times, Act 3. Something. The PS4 just beeped and tried to eject its disc.
Mine does that
sometimes. So, I live in fear that's going to happen during a Bloodborne recording session. So, apologies.
Bit of a boss.
It wanted to join in, didn't like my take. What I'm saying is, I think nowadays, and maybe they re-released Ikaruga recently. Maybe they did do this. Like, I'd be perfectly happy for those games to come with full easy mode. Like, show me all of the big cool bosses. Don't make me play them 80 times. Mode.
Yeah, I think there's something sort of similar in Cuphead, where it's got two modes that I'm aware of. Like, it's this going from Chris Schilling's review for PC Gamer, called Simple and Normal. And Chris said, just, okay, read that as rock hard and the hardest thing ever, basically. So it's super. But if you play on the easier one, apparently you can't get to the very end of the game. Like, in order to do that, you have to go up. Go up that level.
God.
And, do the hardcore version.
That's kind of not what I'd want them to do. Like, I want meaningfully,
just properly.
Show me the game mode. Like, because
to be honest, I could get everything I'm going to get out of this game by watching a Let's Play. I think there's probably not a lot for me to gain from playing.
Yeah,
it,
maybe, but as a developer, you quite like people to spend the £15. I think it's 15 quid, right? Like, this is what I'm saying is, like, basically give me difficulty level of a walking simulator mode where I'm more than happy to spend the money for the 3 hours it takes me to kind of appreciate all of the art and sound and the feel of the game, if not the kind of material, not the kind of material experiences.
Yeah, actually, an artist I follow was saying on Twitter recently that she wishes there was a way. She wants to just watch a Let's Play of the game, but she also wants to, like, pay the developer for it. Like, I'm guessing she must mean not the full price of the game, otherwise she could just buy the game. But yeah, if there was a way to, like, pay $5 and just watch the game, she would do it.
Yeah. So, yeah, perfectly good idea, because people, like, that's probably how I will experience Cuphead now, and they won't benefit from that. And I'm someone who likes super hard games, but that's the thing. It's like, I feel like I love Ikaruga, I love Super Meat Boy, but I don't feel like I have space for this, and I don't really want this experience at the moment. Like, I kind of fancy a more chilled experience, so Cuphead kind of goes into the box marked, it's not for me right now because of its specifically the type of game that it is. Whereas if I might have bought it for the 2 to 3 hour art tour experience, as opposed to watch a YouTube, watch one of them YouTubes.
Actually, yeah, I don't want to watch YouTube because they'll have the same problem I do. Like, they'll be enjoying it, but they'll still be dying and restarting all the fucking time,
exactly,
which is really frustrating.
Yeah.
Maybe wait and watch not a speed run, but like
a really competent quality playthrough.
Yeah, I would watch a speedrun actually.
I watched the world record speedrun of Death of the Outsider. I don't know if you saw that, Tom.
Oh yeah, no,
beats it in 9 minutes, the entire thing. And I just finished Death of the Outsider in about 10 hours, 11 hours. Like, I spent 2 hours on each mission, and really, really liked it. But it's so strange. I always find this. I always watch design speedruns for this reason, because it is like, just like, you kind of, after you've spent so much time in a place, you almost want to watch your illusions about how it's constructed just be completely shattered.
Yeah.
And it's like, because of some like mantling leaping bug that allows you to just sort of basically like fly through the air like a sort of a bounding Mario. It's just Billy Lurk like bounces around Karnaka for 10 minutes and then the world has changed. It's really strange experience. Don't watch that if you want the experience of Death of the Outsider for the first time. That's the opposite of the real thing.
Somebody figured out that they did a tutorial on Steam for how to get out of Heat Signature's practice mode if you destroy the practice terminal. So, and I had to read this because I, as the developer of the game, know that you can just do this on a menu. There's just a menu option for this. We thought of this. We put the menu option in. It's trivially easy to do this. This person linked to his 13-step guide how to do it, and I'm like, oh god, did you not see the menu option? And I read it, and actually, it's really fun because he does know there's an easy way. He doesn't actually find the menu option. He knows of another easy way. But the issue is the objective of the practice mode is like this very small cell and you've got to get to the end of it. But if you destroyed the room that the end terminal is in, you can't interact with it and there's no way to get out of the ship. But actually, the practice world does not take place in a completely like another dimension or an actual, secondary game within a game. You're still in the same game. We just spawn you really far away. And this guy figured out that if you blow up the right parts of the ship in the right way, it can kind of like nudge you with a little bit of velocity, and then you can fast forward time and try and drift back to the rest of reality.
Out of the Matrix.
Yeah, or but back into the real world. I haven't checked, but I'm pretty sure if you did that, like we put like a CRT filter on the screen to show you you're in a virtual world, not the real one. I think that would just stay on for the rest of your life. I think you would be like, yeah, there's a whole real world in here, but you are still in a simulation. Like, don't forget, like, you haven't woken up yet.
How would you then wake up?
Well, like I say, there is an option on the menu at all times.
That's amazing. So does that actually get them out, or does it
gets them to the rest of the game? You can, I think, in fact, you can probably hit some. I imagine you can hit some bugs doing this because there are checks for like, oh, don't do this when you're in practice mode. But you can get to a station. And I guess he can access missions and stuff and live a life of sorts.
But you're a virtual man now.
Yeah.
I like that idea. That's an excellent idea for
If he-
like a Let's Play.
If he ever hits the R key, he'll lose his whole life since the last time, because that's the reset practice mode button.
Huh. So you actually get a restart option only in that context. So if you're really
Yep.
worried about losing your character,
Yeah.
you could do everything in virtual reality, but you reset back to the beginning of the simulation.
Yeah.
Then you
I
put-
wonder, actually, what happens if you go into the practice terminal when you arrive at the station? You could be in the next nested layer of practiceness.
And then
I
time goes
really
a little
hope
slower.
there's no way this is true, but I would really love it if another CRT filter happened over the top of the other one. It just gets even more like scan-lined and chromatically aberrated.
Aberrated.
Aberrated, yeah.
Yeah.
You should put a little glass dome over the R key and a little hammer. So that you could never accidentally press it. In an emergency, you smash glass.
You live a full, rich, other life in this pocket dimension. Yeah, you should have it if you stay there long enough, then you can cut to kind of like your character graying, kind of surrounded by loved ones, increasingly dense CRT layers over the top of all of their children. And then, like, Granddad can like, I love you all, and presses R. And then bang, they're back at the beginning of the Kill People simulation.
I feel like this was an episode of Next Generation.
I think it might have been.
Doesn't Picard play a flute at the end of this?
Speaking of, I guess, easy modes and things, I just started Divinity Original Sin 2, which is, I know you've been playing, Tom.
Yep.
And that has reviewed extremely well, which I can believe because I really liked the first game, but nonetheless. And I suddenly realised, having been a very sort of, I play everything on hard kind of person for a long time, I picked easy. I picked Explore mode because they call it, because initially I was really confused because the modes are called Explorer, Classic, Challenge, and Honor.
Yeah.
You have no honour if you
Is
begin
Challenge
with
harder than Honor, or is Honor harder than Challenge?
Honor's
I know the
the
answer,
hardest.
Classic
And
dishonourable.
And it only tells you what they actually mean when you select one of them.
Yeah, I had the same thing. I spent ages on this decision. I'm like, oh God, I need more information. You can't do this to me. I need to know which one of these. And also, I need to know. Also, I need to know, am I committed to this? Which is, it turns out you're not. And yeah, when you select it, just gives you more information. You haven't committed even then, so you can just go back. But,
yeah, that was just a menu thing. But like, having consulted it, I did that thing of like reaching for normal mode, and then I was like, hang on, it says explicitly exploration mode is people who just kind of want to experience the story and run around, not worry too much about combat. And I was like, shit. I appreciated Divinity's combat, but I wasn't that interested in solving every single combat puzzle relative to seeing the whole game. And I was like, there was a mode, then you could pick for this. But it's something that's ticked over my brain where I'm now letting myself just pick the play it for fun mode, and it's great.
yeah, I actually started on Classic, and the first fight that you get into is like against they're bugs. That's cool what they are.
Some worms.
And I died. Like I could do my best attack could do like 10% of their health bar, and they could destroy me in one turn. Like, Jesus Christ, I'm going to Explorer. I did beat that fight, and I actually played a little bit further, and I got through some other fights that were difficult at first, and I figured them out. And I thought, okay, I've had the experience of figuring this out. I don't want that anymore. I want to go to the Explorer mode. Make it easy for me, please.
Yeah, because I found Divinity Original Sin 1 quite punishingly difficult, really. But like, so the character I'm playing has a trait which means that you get 2 action points back when you kill something, which is a really great thing and really nice. Because Divinity is like an action point based game. It's like the original really brilliant evocation of playing tabletop role playing, where you sort of, obviously there's no GM that can be quite as adaptive as a GM, but you kind of almost like negotiate what you want to do with the game and your pool of action points. So it's not like XCOM or something where you have like a move and a shot, or a double move and no shot, and then that interacts with abilities. You have a bar of action points, and moving consumes them, abilities consume them, and attacking consumes them, and doing items and talking to people can consume them as well. So it's just, how do you want to spend this pool? And so having a mechanic in there where when you kill something you get some back adds a really cool sort of pacey feel to the game. Like, it's just a nice mechanic. It'd be nice if it was a default mechanic almost, because it means that once you kill one, you almost plan around that, right? Like, killing blow here lets me do something else here and do this kind of thing.
There's a cool thing with the rogue class and anyone who has that set of skills, where you can kind of do like action point down payments. So you get more this turn, but you're going to lose that same amount next turn. Which is like, actually, at first it sounds like, oh, it's a heavy price to pay. And then you realize, no, that's just moving action points around. That's like, you don't lose anything in the process. It's just, do you want them now or do you want them later? And so it's really encourages quite a roguey way of thinking, which is, if I can get the kill now, it's worth it. Like, if those 2 extra action points will let me finish this guy off, then I want them now, even if it means I'm drained later.
And I found that stuff actually way more gratifying on the easier difficulty level, straight off the bat. Because on easy, those slug things you fight at the beginning, I can kill in either 1 or 2 hits, depending on what I'm doing, which means that like clearing out a room of them with a big 2-handed hammer is really fun, as opposed to an experience that I like the Pillars of Eternity thing of like every fight, even against some dogs, is like a planned thing. It's helped me kind of pick up pace with the game really quickly, rather than immediately hitting the slog element of it. And I kind of guarded against saying that's a bad thing about these games, because I genuinely enjoy strategic RPG combat, but it's really nice to be able to tune it to not full Diablo, but let me fight this at the pace that I want the narrative to move, which is the way it's well tuned. Where it's like, it feels like you had a fight, but it wasn't like you fought for 2 hours and then had a 5-minute conversation.
I don't know if this is different on Explorer versus Classic, but I think it was when I was playing on Classic against those slugs the first time I fought them. I set fire to them both, and when it was their turn, the slug on the left just ran away to a barrel and hit that. And I was like, what the fuck? It's just gone mad. But it was a barrel full of water, and the water flooded out and put it out. I'm like, fucking hell, the slugs know how to do that? You knew what was in the barrel? Come on!
Yeah,
but I was also really impressed.
I'm talking about that stuff because that is Divinity for me. Like the system stuff, obviously, like adaptive difficulty levels is makes it more accessible, but like it's so intensely sort of almost pedantic about how all of its different systems interact. So how fire and water and ice and blood conducting electricity was the thing we discussed last time, I think, about very, very Divinity mechanics. But this loops into exactly how characters you play work. So I'm playing as an undead character, and undead are hurt by healing spells and potions and healed by poison.
Are you a custom character or an original one?
I'm an original one, which I want to talk about as well.
Yeah, I got stuck on. I got stuck on the character creation screen, so I just did not know what to commit to.
I would like you all to be proud of me for breezing through character creation in a mere 45 minutes this time.
I got through
which is some kind of record.
I got through it in about 5, which is a miracle for me. And the reason for that, we can come back to the kind of ramifications of being undead, but the reason for that is, if you don't aware, so the game has obviously full deep character creation for all of its races and all of the undead versions of all of those races, as I think we mentioned before. But the thing I thought that was really interesting, and this is such a fucking great idea, and I can't believe no other RPG has done it, where you have the choice of like 4 or 5 or 6 what are called origin characters, where you can customize their appearance and their class and their abilities and stuff like that, but they fundamentally have a backstory. You can even rename them, but you probably shouldn't, because they can say their own name. Right. So they have like a very specific backstory, a very specific personal quest that they want to resolve. And sorry, Tom.
Some of them have names that are kind of like, they're almost like a nickname or a role, so you could, like, having a different real name might work.
Yeah, like the Red Prince would really work to change. So some of
That's me.
Yeah,
I like that. I was almost him.
I'm playing as a undead called Thane, who is rad, who is like, he just woke up one day and a million years has passed and wants to figure out what happened to his people, who are now probably ancient, kind of thing.
That's me. You're probably wondering how I got into this situation.
Exactly. But what I didn't realize, and that's a really nice idea, so you have these characters that are almost like prepackaged, and as a group they almost feel like a kind of really nicely curated like set of D&D characters or something like that. Like they're all really quite nicely realized. You can click a button on the character creation screen and the character will kind of like step forward and tell you what their deal is.
Yeah, I really like that actually. That was that got you both the preview of like who this person is and what their personality is, and also is the voice acting good, because that's the like 80% of my decision is going to be based on that.
And you do get some choices about, like I say, so you decide what class they are, and you can swap skills in and out, and I gave him hair. He has sort of raggy grey hair now, but it looks rad.
Oh man, I did go with the Red Prince, but I also sort of re-rolled at one point to try a custom character, and I wanted to be an undead lizard. And I was so impressed to see that when you get to the skin color options, there still are the same number of different skin colors, but they're all just like, they're like American Psycho business card colors. Like washed bone and, oh, no.
I like to call it bone tone.
I can't remember any of them, but they're good.
But the rad thing about that, I didn't realize, so when you do this, you're like, oh, cool, there's some preset character options for you. That's nice. And, Baldur's Gate did something similar-ish. What's rad about it is those are the companions.
Yeah.
That's the fucking, like, last end of the exploding brain meme kind of, reason this is genius is those are the fucking companions. So basically, you can choose to not have a protagonist and you play as one of the companions. And like that's like any RPG you can think of would probably work in that way. Like you ask yourself the question, what if one of the companions you get over the course of your quest was the main character and their loyalty mission became an alternate main thread for them? And it's like, that's fucking genius. And that's exactly how Divinity works. So
I'm really intrigued about this because I'm like I say, I've played it two ways now. I've tried being a custom character. I picked an origin character because I don't know what I would have decided if I was left to my own devices, but I just heard somebody say just pick an origin character because there's so much like unique stuff and specific things about them. And then I picked one, and I got into the game, and I've discovered, oh, all the other origin characters are here too, and I can have them in my party. And then also the way Divinity works is you can just switch to one of those people and just be them and just walk up to people and talk to them as that person. But when it comes to their personal business, some of them, like if I be that person and I go and talk to the person they want to talk to for their personal quest type thing, I feel like I get the whole conversation. But in others, there's one where like one of those characters just needs to talk to another character, and I won't say who or what happens, but I won't say who, I will say what happens, which is that she kills him. And I, as the person controlling her, and like at that point she was alone, like I'd gone off on her own to do this, I still didn't get the actual conversation. Like she kills this guy, and I hear it described from another character's perspective, and it explains this with like, oh, there's a source link thing, so you're always present in the background whenever one of these people is. But like controlling that character, in a lot of ways you are that character, but if it's not the one you picked at the start, I think you don't get the full skinny on what they're doing.
You get to make their choices. I think that's the thing.
Yeah,
because you do get like full dialogue
intriguing
options for them. You get to make quite big decisions about who they are.
Yeah,
like for some reason, my ancient skeleton dude is like a fundamentally quite nice but proud skeleton. Like, we'll look after people. I mean, you have to make a choice at the beginning of the game to rescue some of those other companions, but like, kind of has his own character, and that seems to fit with what's going on worldly in his plot. So it's not like you pick and you just role play as one specific pre-written character the entire time. It's just really clever. It just works so well. It's just
it's a good system. I started to have buyer's remorse with this because I've been told to play an origin character because all the unique content, and then I discovered, oh, but they're all just around and I can have them in my party and I can even play as them. So don't I just get that unique content anyway? And by picking one, I've sort of wasted my chance to be a custom character, which I can't do now. That there are no, I don't get to design a character. I have not found any undead lizard people, and that's who I really want to be. So that's why I went back and re-rolled. Like I say, I think there are some differences from being an origin character versus just having one in your party. And also, the undead lizard I played, I quickly hated her voice. I realised, I actually don't want to play this character at all. But I had a really weird situation to do with this where if one of your party dies in combat, as long as they don't all die, they just sort of stay dead, and you can bring them back to the resurrection scroll. But I was in a situation where all the stuff I collected was on my main character. My main character is the Red Prince, who, by the way, you can customize his appearance, but you can't change his skin color because it has to be red. He's a lizard, by the way. He's like, I liked him immediately because he's a kind of like aloof but slightly foolish prince. Someone who's like believes he's a big deal, but actually his current situation is not at all reflective of that, and so he's always going through the world like shocked that people haven't heard of him and stuff.
Yeah, he's a
which I
complete
enjoy.
asshole to you when you meet him as an NPC rather than as you.
So I was playing as him, and my first companion was is it Losa?
Yeah, the bard.
The bard. Whose story I liked, but I didn't pick her because I didn't like her voice acting. Anyway, she was my companion, and we got in a fight, and the Red Prince got killed. And Losa was still alive, but she didn't have the inventory that I'd had. She has her own inventory, and she didn't have any resurrect scrolls. And so I couldn't bring him back, so now I'm just Losa. Just like, I'm running around. And then while I'm running around, a guy comes up to me and your objective at this point is to get off this island. And there are seemingly lots and lots of different ways of doing it. But this guy runs up to me and says, oh, hey, I'm looking for... I think he's maybe even heard of me. And he's looking for he has got a plan to get off the island, but it's a 2-man plan, and so he needs someone else. And he asked me to join him, but he stresses right up front, you can't have anyone else with you. It just has to be me and you. You can't take anyone else with you. And I'm like, I'm not even the main character. Like, I'm the sidekick. The main character's dead over there.
You escaped.
Like,
You've escaped the plot. That's it.
Yeah, I was like, sort of, one part of me was saying, well, say no to this because this isn't even, I'm not even the right character to be doing this. But then the other part was like, can I just go with this? I think I'm just going to say yes, because even if I decide not, even if I do want the Red Prince back, it would be interesting to just find out what this guy's plan is, and maybe we can exploit it in some way. Yeah. And I haven't got any further that quest, so I don't know how that works out. But it was kind of an amazing moment of like, have I just, I've just left that story.
Am I the protagonist now?
Yeah. It's amazing. There's quite a lot of. I do want to know how far it would let me go with that, because, like I say, there's some differences in being an origin character versus having an origin character with you, I think. And I also hit a thing that was really subtle and surprising, in that my first there's somebody who trying to get some oranges back, and I found the person who stole the oranges, and I stole. He was asleep.
Would you say it was a Divinity Orange's sin?
Very good.
Sorry.
It was my oranges story. So I found the guy, he was asleep, and so I snuck up to him, and I pickpocketed him, and I found an orange, so I stole the orange. And then it turns out, for some totally unrelated reason, my character actually needed something from this guy that was not to do with the oranges. And so I actually woke him up and talked to him, and then we had this whole thing. And this is going to sound weird, but for the personal quest that I needed to do with this guy, he needed something that was inside the orange that I had already stolen from him. And in the conversation I had, he said, oh, I need to do this thing, but I need this particular herb, and I don't have any. Do you have any? And I hadn't heard of this herb, but my character said one of my options was, yeah, you can have the one I have. And so I did that, and I did it, and it all completed. And then I went back and did it with this, like I say, I re-rolled, and I did, basically I went back and did it a different way. I didn't steal the orange first, and if you don't steal the orange, he already has the herb that's inside it. And so he just goes with that, and he talks about like how it's something, because he stole it, he's a bit conflicted about whether or not he should use it. And so if you've stolen that from his inventory, this is the only circumstance I can think of this would have happened. Like, if you pickpocketed it from him before talking to him, he just completely rolls with the fact that he doesn't have any, and your character rolls with the fact that you do have some, and they just work it out. It's amazing.
It's really just a phenomenal bit of like complex RPG design. It's interesting, because I think the thing I find off-putting about Divinity, not off-putting, but like that I have to adjust to, that the origin stuff has helped with, is it's not like it's a pleasant game to spend time in, but it's not like the most compelling narrative or anything. Like, there are bits of like funny writing and things that I like. There's the writing is fine, but like I don't feel like drawn into the central mystery at all. I don't know why. Maybe it's just it's
quite magic-y stuff. It's not like deeply personal. Oh, well, people have personal quests in this, but the sort of the source stuff is always very airy-fairy.
It feels like it kind of has the tone of a D&D campaign where like no one's taking it that seriously. Like, you know what I mean? Like, serious things are happening, but the players are all messing around. Like, given that it's designed for co-op as well, maybe that makes sense, that you don't want a story that people are going to have to really sit and listen to, because ultimately they're going to blast through it. But the Origins characters really help me with that as well, because like they kind of give you a complete character to kind of occupy that fits in that world and kind of meshes with its silliness and that kind of thing. Whereas if you're inclined to try and create like a serious character in that game, it will fight you at every turn. Like you press the sneak button and you turn into a bush. Like that's the RPG that it is. So
I the first like 8 times I did it, I turned into a barrel, which I now know is just coincidence. But as it happens, I was wearing a bucket on my head, and this looks an awful lot like the hat just gets bigger. Like the barrel is essentially a large bucket, and so that animation is fun. And
is that because your new character's undead?
No, I was the Red Prince at this time. It's because I moused over a bucket and it said bucket brackets helmet. Like, oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, like because as Thane at the beginning, because if you're undead, you have to cover your face because you're a skeleton. You have to wear clothes and not let on you're a skeleton, basically, a lot. But apart from in conversation options where you get given loads of opportunities, I don't know if this is just Thane or all skeletons, to like allude to the fact you're a skeleton. Like sometimes you get that option with someone to say like, by the way, I'm a skeleton underneath this bucket that I'm wearing. But a lot of the times you get these...
I'm naked except for the bucket. You're not going to believe this, but I'm actually undead.
And so at the beginning of the game, you have like this magic mask that can make you appear to be any race, and then you lose it really quickly. And so I had to just find whatever was on the shipwreck to disguise the fact that I'm a skeleton, and that was a bucket. But you get loads of really good options, like talking to like an orphan child alone on the beach, scared of everything, not knowing what's coming next. And the child will say something like, "There's just so many things to be afraid of," and you have like the option because when you can tell, it'll say like, one of my tags is mystic, so I get to say things that are kind of related to mysticism, or like scholar, I could say things that are scholarly. And one of them is just undead, and it's like, yes, the world is full of terrifying things, and the implication is that you just sort of like you're always on the edge of going like slowly revealing, taking off the bucket to reveal the howling gilded skeleton.
I like those tags. You have like sort of racial ones and. I don't know whether you call it like profession or whatever, like mystic versus scholar versus scoundrel or outlaw, I think it is. But there's also one for every origin character. Like each origin character has their own unique tag. And the thing that took me a bit to get used to is I'm used to in Fallout 3 and 4, if you have like a high enough science skill and it says science in front of a dialogue option, this is like a sort of super cool option that's going to completely solve the problem for you, and it's your reward for having a high enough stat in that. And so I'm used to those. If it has like a tag in front of it, I'm used to that being like, oh, this just solves the problem. This is just like total ace, this thing. And in Divinity, that's not the case at all. They're just like, this is the thing. This is the thing a lizard would say. And I'm in a lot of situations where lizards are being screwed over, and I always have the option to be completely indignant about it or furious about it. And one guy was just like, he'd been singing some songs for us, and he was like, oh, do you know any from your culture? And my lizard option was like, try but ultimately fail to remember the song of your people. That's my lizard special ability. I'm like, screw up your eyes, think really hard. No, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only like an hour and a bit in, and it's already great. What I'd really like to do, I think, is do this run with one of the origin characters. But I'd actually really like to play this co-op. It feels like, relative to original Divinity, like I much prefer the introduction. It's much better, much slicker. But also, like, I mean, also it's got like a full set of GM tools and things as well. But like, I really like the idea of doing it again in co-op and then be generating specific characters. Because the origin characters, the fact that you pick one and then the game populates the rest of the game with the others, has a little bit of a sense of like playing D&D with computer controlled mates, right? Because which is the point of companion characters in RPGs anyway, but I think it achieves that quite successfully because it feels a lot more organic because you knew that you could have been any of them. It's a weird thing, but yeah, it's real good.
It's funny because the other character I was really strongly considering going with hates me. Like we're born mortal enemies virtually, and that's an interesting thing to deal with.
Well, so I don't know. So given that you are the Red Prince, so this is not a spoiler or anything. When you were on the beach at the beginning of the island, Was there someone looking out to sea? Like a companion to me?
No. I've since played as a custom character and found the Red Prince there,
Right.
and I think there's just no one there for me.
Okay, I was just wondering if it swapped someone else in, because
No, I don't think so.
because I had a really lovely thing, because the Red Prince was a complete arsehole to me. Like when I met him, and I decided that my skeleton doesn't take shit. So just like, fuck you, I'm off. And then it was nice that was the only character I met afterwards, like after the intro. And then there's a really nicely written sort of little dialogue where you can... I think that's one thing I really like about its writing, actually. Given the high stakes fantasy stuff isn't like hugely deep, but it doesn't just hit you with negative consequences for being mean in a way that I think quite a lot of Bioware RPGs do. Like, it feels like an argument, being an arsehole to someone in a Bioware game creates like an argument straight away. Like, no one ever goes like, fair enough, like, or something like that. Whereas, like, you this feels more natural. You walk up to someone and say, actually, you were an arsehole earlier and I'm cross at you. And they go, well, I respect that. But, we've got bigger fish to fry now. Like,
There's actually, it did fall down a bit because they have a feature which I think is a good feature where I think they don't want you to not pick a particular NPC as a companion just because their class happens to not be what you need for your party. So whenever you meet these origin characters, after you've sort of had your initial conversation, you've decided, or they've decided to join you, and you've decided you want them to join you, they'll say, they'll give you the option of like, okay, well, normally I'm a fighter, but do you want me to like specialize in magic or stealth or something? Which is a bit of a weird conversation.
Very job
at the best
interview,
of times.
isn't it? It's like, what are your strengths? Well, it's all things. What do you need?
But like I say, one of these characters just has a very good reason to hate me and everyone like me. And she was absolutely upfront about this and would like almost killed me in our initial conversation. And then eventually I think I sort of specialize in wits, and I used it to sort of like put forward a sort of arch and strange line of reasoning. It was kind of like, but this is the last thing I expect for you and I to team up together. And she bought it. And then, like, but just, and she was like, I suppose I shouldn't kill you yet. And the next thing she says, also, what class would you like me to be? I'll just reinvent my entire life's profession at your whim.
Also, I'm pretty sure, I want to start again and try this at some point, I'm pretty sure you have the option to kill every companion in the game in their sleep in the first part of the game. At which point they don't appear in the game at all.
I've heard that you can kill anyone in Divinity.
Yeah. Interesting, really interesting. Can't wait to go back.
That does actually tie into my experience so far, because the Oranges quest did not end well with me. I think I just sort of said something wrong in the conversation when I was trying to turn it in, and the person I was it took me like 6 hours to do this fucking quest. That became my main quest. That was the one where it was the first one I got, and so even though loads of other opportunities came up and lots of other, it was clear to me there was
this fucking Origins thing.
Yeah.
Oranges.
Even though it's clear to me there's loads of other ways off this island, because this is the first one I encountered. I'm like, I'm going to find these fucking oranges, and I'm going to bring them back to the fucking guy who wants the fucking oranges. And then I did, and I slightly screwed up the conversation in some way, and he attacked me, and so I had to fight him. And then I ended up fighting just... It's one of those things where, like, if you attack an NPC in town in Skyrim or something, if you're not level 25, you're going to get absolutely slaughtered, and everyone attacks you, and it's game over. And probably if I'd done this immediately, it would have been game over, but I had enough companions at this point. Like, your level is not as important as just how many people you have in your party at this point. And with 4 people, we were actually able to kind of take him on, but it did kind of spill out. Like, I think, okay, it's these 3 guys, and we kill like 2 of them, and then there's just like, oh, there's 2 more people around the corner, and I think they might just be other people in the town who just saw this happen. And I think the starting sort of town is Fort Joy's ghetto, and the ghetto is just like a mortuary now. There's just corpses everywhere, because we've had to like one by one just kill everybody who got into the orange fracas. And so that's... I didn't really think about it at the time. At the time, it kind of felt like, oh, this is one of the ways this quest ends, is you can have
We're killing everybody in the town.
There's a fight scene with the key characters, and I had noticed, oh, this seemed to spill out, and these other 2 characters, I'm not sure if they were really part of the quest. We just killed them anyway, because they attacked us. And now that's sort of linking into the thing I heard, that in Divinity you can kill anybody. So I think this may have been more of an emergent solution than I realised.
And that's how the Oranges situation was resolved.
Did you have big town fear in this game at all?
Not really. I think actually, sorry. I think genuinely the origins. Oh, for fuck's sake! I hate this. The origins character option has almost so I think what I've identified is that I tend to create ciphers in RPGs, like quite blank main characters, and that the rest of the world reflects off, because I'm kind of worried about making big decisions about characters that might shut options off later on, whereas choosing an origins character shuts down so many options but gives you a specific sense of who your character is straight away, in a way that I find that stuff less intimidating, partly because I will probably refuse quests unless, I'm not going to 100% this game. I want to have an adventure and do the things that make sense for me to do, and so that sensibility feels very supported by the game, and that means that big town is less frightening as a whole, because it's just a big town made up of small stories.
Like Jack Nicholson said in that movie. I haven't had it either. I think it's partly because you're just in one section of this town.
Is it because the town isn't especially big?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Put simply, the town is not so big.
It was too big, and then you killed enough people to make it.
Yeah, I want the town just big enough that I can kill about half the people who live there to win a quest.
It takes a big town to win a quest. It's great, apparently. Other great and extremely time-consuming game that I'm attempting to play at the same time is Divinity, which we should definitely talk about, Tom, is...
Back on the Total War crack.
Total War Warhammer 2. Before we do talk about this, I should give a very minor disclaimer that I didn't work on the game, but I did some work adjacent to the game in an official capacity, in that in the collector's edition of Total War Warhammer 2, there is a little guidebook thing to the game, which I wrote, which was a really cool thing to get to do, and it meant that I obviously had to, in order to write a guidebook, had to play the game quite a long time ago. But yeah, so I should disclose that, because I'm going to talk about the game and what I like about it. But I did some work for Creative Assembly on it, so there you go. There's my disclaimer. Tom, you should talk about that. You played way more than me, so you should lead.
I'm sure I have, actually. I mean, it's always difficult with Total Warhammer in particular, because it really focuses, unlike the historical Total Wars, it really focuses down on 4 factions, then tries its best to make those 4 factions really meaningfully different and exciting in their own right. And Warhammer's just a brilliant vehicle for this, because the factions are just so insanely different anyway, and there's all of the kind of artwork is done, is designed. All of the look and feel of each race is already there and in place, and that's not to denigrate the talent of the artists who have actually brought it to life, but they've done an incredibly good job of making all of the units look exactly like the models and move just kind of how you always imagined they would. Even the super awesome creatures like phoenixes are amazing. The high elf phoenixes, just like beautiful glowing, as a phoenix would be, a beautiful glowing bird, but it's sort of the model comes to life in the way that you would hope. And just that aspect of it alone has been wonderful, just to see that world realised in such a clever way. Especially the battlefields, which are like some of the most beautiful battlefields they've done, because you just can't. You can only do so much with a historical Total War, but in this they've gone fully 100% into just mad high fantasy stuff. So you're in Ulthuan, which is where the High Elves live, and on the world map there are just rainbows everywhere and like cyclones of magic just kind of weaving through the mountains, and it's absolutely just beautiful. And when you actually go and fight in those places, like you see all that shit just around you, just towering. Like I've paused the game so often just to get in a close up on a unit, and then just sort of like create these beautiful like snapshots of this war.
At some point, somewhere in every battlefield, something is shooting up into the sky.
Yeah, so some sort of laser, or some sort of magic, and all the lighting is lovely as well, and the skybox is really nice. So just as a kind of just as an aesthetic achievement, I think it's my favourite Total War. But the thing I love about it even more than that is that they've utterly streamlined the game. They've just done hundreds of small things that make it easier. Like they've just taken all the friction and the kind of the stressful stuff out of it, And it feels like playing Civilization, old Civ, where you just click next turn, next turn, next turn all the time, because it puts so little in the way in between you and actually getting to the next turn. And that thing where you're clicking, like any of these games, you're constantly clicking next turn, but it's actually better paced than Civ because there's always new stuff to build. They've accelerated the game in smart places, so like city growth seems to be much faster, so you're always unlocking new options of stuff to build in different towns. Army movement stuff the same. The whole game just feels faster. It seems to be faster. Progress is faster, and a lot of the smart stuff they've done with like tying technology into buildings makes your decisions on the world map in terms of what you're building and how you're constructing your cities much more meaningfully important. And so it's just loads and loads of small things they've done to make it work. But the best thing of all is they've actually the game mode is completely different. It's like the way the game works now in terms of your objectives is completely refreshed. So normally in Total War, you pick one of loads of factions and the game says, okay, conquer these 3 territories that are in various parts of the map by this amount of time. That's how you win. And it's basically just, it's always quite a boring thing. They've tried to put twists on it in the past with, Rome, Total War, where, world events can happen and people can turn against you and there could be betrayals and things. But what Total War Warhammer 2 says is, okay, all of the factions are after the same thing. There's an enormous vortex in the middle of the world, and everyone can affect the vortex by performing rituals. And everyone has a unique resource they need to collect to power up the ritual and actually kind of execute the next phase. And it's a giant race. And in fact, there's literally a bar at the top of the screen where you can see how far along each of the factions are. So you can see who's getting ahead and who's falling behind, who's about to activate the next ritual. Which basically says this is who you need to screw over if you're behind. And this is who you need to look out for if you're ahead, which is absolutely brilliant. Just that one little icon gives you so much drive and so much impetus to actually go out and affect the world. So if I'm Lizard Men and I see that the High Elves are one up on me, you can hire mercenary forces to go out and harass them, or you can just send your own forces to go out and harass them. Because whenever you commit to one of these rituals to move yourself along the bar, those rituals like make 3 of 4 of your cities the ritual sites, and you have to protect them at all costs. And if someone attacks them, it will disrupt the ritual and put you back. So it becomes a real kind of Scrabble and the map is brilliantly designed for this because everyone is kind of on these big islands around the central vortex. So everyone's kind of like island hopping around, just kind of getting into loads of conflicts everywhere and being really scrappy. And you're really rewarded for being proactive and traveling all over the map and fighting loads of stuff. And it says like each faction is attuned to a certain climate. So the game's saying, don't play it like Civ and very slowly conquer all this. Throw your armies into this place and wreck it, and then go back home and just constantly go and kind of harry and harass. Really, really exciting Total War. I love what they've done with it. The factions are so exciting.
Yeah.
They all have their own...
Which other... there's 4?
Yeah, so there's Lizardmen. I always mention Lizardmen because I've been playing with them the most. High Elves, Dark Elves, and Skaven.
No, cool.
Skaven are the most fun I've had with Total War.
I think their special ability is so good. So each they all behave really differently, both on the strategic layer and in battles. So the Skaven have their own form of corruption, and the more you corrupt the land, the more public disorder spreads. So it's bad for Skaven actually. Like if Skaven is just a chaotic, self-destructive society, which is what they are.
Yeah, they're like sort of Machiavellian rat communists. Like
they'll stab each other like in the back. They'll eat each other. It's a rat world out there. And the more you corrupt a province, when you're going to battle, you can just start summoning units up from underground.
It's the best.
Anywhere on the battlefield. So I'm sitting like at the bottom of this enormous hill, and our forces are evenly matched, but they've got the elevation advantage, and they're High Elves. They're fucking amazing at shooting. So they're bringing these...
They're High Elves and they're high up.
I know, what the hell am I supposed to do? So all these elite archers kind of lining up on this ridge, like firing loads of stuff down into my Ratman, and I've got millions of Ratmen. Skaven, you get to wield vast armies because you're a horde. But whenever one gets set and starts shooting, I just like click on it and then go, okay, there are rats there now. And you see all this earth explode, and like a horde of tiny, quite shit rats swarm the archers and stop them from firing. Like it's
there's shit rats here now.
It's such a good feel. Like like it's interesting. That one mechanic means I auto resolve less, which is again in a Total War thing that they needed to kind of. encourage players not to do, but give you a good reason not to do. It can't be just to force you to play the battles. It has to be you want to play them. And one of the reasons is, in a close battle, correctly using that ability feels amazing.
Yeah,
because you end up with these. Because it feels, and the great thing is, and I love the setting. It feels like it's such a Skaven-y thing to happen. Like, I've had there was a great I was playing as Clan Moors. There's a great there's an Empire rogue army. So these are interesting things. So rogue armies are like, they're not factions, they're not small factions, they're just one army, one massive army that walks around doing its own thing. And they're all themed, and there's no faction restrictions. So they'll be themed around like a high concept, and then the army is designed by Creative Assembly to, fill a particular fantasy. So this Empire one are pirates, basically. Like, they're kind of like Imperial soldiers that have just gone rogue and just wandered off to the far side of the world to go sort of privateering. And they have a mixture of Imperial units and cannons and sort of outrider cavalry and things like that. And early on, I found, as Skaven, outrider cavalry are quite hard to deal with, because Skaven don't have a lot of fast units initially. Like, they are fast for infantry, but they can't catch a horse. And also there are loads of cannons and stuff, and setting up so that like I'd hide my army and the extent of my army in trees and in the tree line, kind of lure this Imperial army down into the valley, and then have, at the same time as like the full bulk of my kind of rat horde kind of reveals itself and hits their front line, rats start bursting out of the ground and stopping their and killing their cannon crews, so that they can't do anything there. And then, it's a 45-second cooldown before you can do it again, but then you can use it to obviously like pincer people and things like that, but also to like stop retreats, so that like, those outrider cavalry that are skirmishing, so they'll run up and shoot and then run back again. They'll often wait to run away until the moment your like infantry catch them. So they'll stay and shoot until the moment you're about to catch them, and then they'll start to run, and they're on horses, so you'll never catch them, unless a load of rats, the shit rats, just come out of the ground at that point, and then they're pincered on both sides.
Yeah.
And the best thing about it is it's super fun to do, but also it really feels like that's what it is like to die to Skaven, right? Like, there's just more rats, and they keep coming out of the fucking ground. Even to the point that they've recorded voice lines for like the high elves and the humans and things. So they shout that, basically. Like, there are rats everywhere! Like,
shitty rats right out of the ground!
It does way more to tie your decisions on the strategic layer into the battles as well. So the number of times you get to do that is tied to the percentage of corruption in the region in which you're fighting. And you can do loads of stuff to spread corruption. Like, your heroes, you can basically, they've got their own skill trees, and you can just have them specialise and just barfing everywhere or whatever it is they do.
My specialty is I'm just constantly vomiting.
What's that rat doing here? Just vomiting endlessly into this river for no reason. And if he does it enough and you get up to like 70% corruption, then you can summon like 6 shit rat units out of the ground wherever you want to.
It's also tied to the food mechanic, which is a Skaven specific thing, because Skaven have like a food bar, which is like a percentage basically, and if it's low, then you're in real fucking trouble, and if it's high up, then your growth is increased. However, when any battle begins, you can buy new charges or additional charges of Menace Below for like 3 food a go. So I'm sitting at like 110 food at the moment. Like, we're fat little rat people. Also, Skaven can eat the armies that they just defeated in order to replenish their own troops. But that means, because the reason for that is that Skaven won't do anything if there's no food on offer. So if you offer food, more Skaven will be available to burst out of the ground. And that's a really nice mechanic as well, because it means that it's not the slow progress of corruption. It means that if you've got loads of food, you can afford to go do a risky play overseas and just buy a whole load of charges of Menace Below when you get there. Yeah, because you will then Skaven can also invest food when they capture a city to automatically get that city at a higher level. And that is helpful because of the other rad. We could just sort of why Skaven a rad hour, but the other amazing Skaven mechanic is no one else can see their cities. Yeah, so Skaven cities look like ruins. So they look like cities nobody owns. Excellent. Until you send a hero there to do the scout action, at which point it reveals if it's a Skaven city or not. Because Skaven, they don't build anything. They do, but they build it underground, and on the surface, all you see is a ruin. So if your opponent sees you sack a city and raise it, they don't know if you've raised it or taken it. And if you take it, you can invest food. If you have a surplus of food, automatically get that city to like level 2 or 3 rather than have to build it up. And every single Skaven building generates income, which is unusual. I think they're the only race that does that, which means that Skaven have this mechanic which is very unlike traditional Total War and very unlike most of the factions, where you can almost get value out of like a quick burn city. So you wreck a city in enemy territory, you turn it into you invest food and turn it into like quite a high level Skaven city straight away. You throw up some buildings, you get like 3 turns worth of construction income and unit production and stuff out of it, and then you just move on. And if they find it and destroy it, it doesn't matter because it's not the core of your network.
Yeah, it's going to make money for you forever if they never actually
yeah,
run
and
into
also
it.
they have to deal with it. Like at some point they have to deal with it, but you can ignore it forever then. And it feels really neat. Like I just wiped out my first High Elf faction on my Skaven campaign because they went to fight some lizard men, and I got one of the other Skaven clans to start a war with the same lizard men. So the lizard men were fighting on 2 fronts. The High Elves were sieging the lizard man capital city, and then the lizard men in retaliation took the penultimate High Elf city, and the final High Elf city was on an island. And so while the lizard men were distracted the lizard men were distracted killing the Skaven that I wanted them to kill because I wanted to take those Skaven stuffs later. I put my army on a boat, sailed to the High Elf homeland, sacked that city, took it away, and then the one surviving High Elf army just died of attrition in the lizard man jungle, and their entire civilization was gone. And it was like, hey! And it was extremely rats, right?
Yeah.
It was like, there was no kind of grand confrontation. It was just like I just took their undefended homeland because they didn't expect a rat uprising from nowhere and then back home again.
They can travel in the underways as well, so they can go pretty much where they want unless they're intercepted.
Yeah.
They're amazing. I love all the factions I've played with so far, actually. Apart from, the High Elves are a bit more conventional. Apart from when it comes to diplomacy, which is still one of the weaker aspects of the game, I think. But,
I think fighting against High Elves is more interesting.
Yeah, it's fun to fight them. They're fun to kill.
Their key mechanic is really interesting because it's the martial prowess buff. So if their units are at full strength at the beginning of a fight, they're quite substantially better throughout the fight, and that reflects the fact that like High Elves prefer to fight if they've had some time to like polish the armor and like get ready. Which means that if you have like really good Skaven assassins, for example, that specialize in assaulting units, you can damage them before the fight, and then they don't get there. Like basically, just some Skaven go into the camp and like just tip things over, and the High Elves are very upset by this, and then aren't quite into it as much.
My favourite chalice is lying askance. The battle is lost.
Exactly, and that means that's it's a cool mechanic, but from a High Elf player point of view, it means that you spend it encourages you to swap units in and out and to like
merge units up
units and add noblemen to your armies because they add unit replenishment and things like, what I mean. It's supposed to be fight in quite an elegant way where you like you create a perfect force and then you win and then you retreat that force out and you swap it out for another fresh one. You don't go on a slog. But that's actually more fun to subvert than it is to play with, I think. Like, it's more fun to be just fucking up their stuff, and they're like, yeah.
Yeah, they're fantastic. I managed to bankrupt my Lizardman empire because Lizardmen get to perform rites. In fact, a few of the factions do. One of the Lizardmen rites summons a massive army of feral dinosaurs at your capital city. You press a button, and they chant at the sun, and then suddenly there are feral dinosaurs everywhere, which means you can barely control them in combat. They just go, and they're made up of Carnosaurs, which are T-Rexes, and Stegodons, which are Stegosauruses, and sometimes crystals mounted on their backs that they use to fire lasers at enemies. Lizardmen are the best.
Lizardmen are great. Yeah.
But apparently these feral dinosaurs need to be paid like everyone else. Like they've unionized or something.
Terrible, we're not that fair.
But they've got to get paid for their business. So their gold upkeep is substantial. And I didn't really think this through when I summoned them, because it was a desperate defense against chaos. Chaos Marauders were coming into my territory, which is a thing that happens when you activate one of the big rights to try and affect the vortex. And I was completely unprepared for the number of them, so I summoned an army of feral dinosaurs to take care of the problem. And they immediately wiped out my entire gold reserve. They were just like, "Well, we'll save your ass, but only if you pay us," said the dinosaurs that
Like the iron bag.
barely house trained, just coming from the jungles, from the wilds to perform the whims of the giant magical frog that leads them. Yeah. But they were very effective. It was amazing. I would go in to watch those matches just to watch them do stuff, because they look amazing on the battlefield. They're so much fun. Oh my god, they've done a brilliant job. I'm so happy that they've streamlined the Total War formula. They've got these amazing armies that feel as though it feels like a different Total War game every time you play a different campaign. Like, they've really done a good job of focusing in on making each one different on every layer, both the strategy layer and the battle layer.
Awesome. Streamlined is my favourite word to hear in respect to a sequel. I know not everyone feels this way, but usually if I come to a series late, the problem is it's become so bloated now that I can't get into it. It's just like, I've got to learn everything from the previous game and also everything they've added. And I've talked about this problem with XCOM recently, which is not a series I came to later. Well, came to it with the remakes, but the remakes I've been in, I've played all of them. But yeah, I'm always desperate for game designers just cut some stuff out, just make it work better.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's only added a lot to Total War, like the rights and stuff are completely new.
Yeah, I think it explains itself way better.
The UI is better. I think
the UI is a lot better. Also, the tooltips are better. Like, they've always had millions of tooltips in Total War, but I think they explain things so clearly, and the resource systems feel way clearer to me than they have.
Yeah, does the tutorials? I found out actually, so this is a dumb thing, in that I kind of wanted to do the full new player experience because I was playing the full game for the first time. But I had the weird experience of someone who literally wrote a guide for this game, having to sit through quite a long, in-depth tutorial the first time I played. And I did start to get frustrated, but I did ask for this. Like, I did check the box for new player experience. It's like, I really shouldn't have clicked that. But yeah, really just handhold you through like the basics of Total War.
Yeah, and I think it's good that it does that, and it's quite clear about what the level of new player experience you're getting. Like, it literally says, point the camera at this, then it zooms in and explains something, then it says, point the camera over here now, and it explains that, and it does that in the battles as well. So I think that's necessary for people to understand the basics of it. Yeah.
I want to say I'll play this one, but I have said that about every Total War for the last 10 years. I'm like, this is the one I'm going to play, I think.
I think this is the one to do, though.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Like, it is super...
Yeah, what else am I doing?
Yeah, quite.
I mean, it's so much fun just to go in, and they've got loads of like narrative battles that you play not even in any campaign, just if you want to play around the units and see some cool maps. They've got a whole series. They've got like, I think 2 for each faction that you can do, and that's not even a skirmish campaign or anything. It's just independent. Got their own voice acting, got their own setup and stuff. Yeah.
Did you do the Skaven right where you get the essentially walking nuke?
Oh no,
It's so
this
good.
sounds good.
So you get one of the rights. So like, I think it's called the Right of Doom, but Doom is in all caps, like 3 exclamation marks, because Skaven things. And you get a unique engineer hero who only has one ability on the world map, and it always succeeds and it always kills him, where he just walks into any enemy city and it basically creates an earthquake, but the idea is he just sets off like a kind of warpstone nuke in the middle of the city.
Oh, wow.
And like and it collapses all of the walls and like all of the buildings.
Oh my goodness,
like it damages all the buildings in it, and it does 90% damage to every wall.
Imagine
so you
doing that to the high elf capital city.
I did it to a lizardman capital city. It's the best feeling because I had Queek, who's my
I like Queek, yeah.
like ready to show up with 2 armies. But like, obviously, fortified lizardman capital, their army was elsewhere because I'd been a dick somewhere else. Skaven's just being a dick, and I think that's one of the reasons it's so much fun. Actually, is like because the playstyle for Skaven is about subverting Total War norms, like ignoring territory and just fighting 2 people at once, and then swapping, to get them to fight each other and that kind of thing. It feels like you're being a twat, and actually, given that Total War's problems sometimes stem from it being very stolid and kind of one territory, then capture the next territory, then capture the next territory. Definitely. Playing in a way that's just chaos, pun not intended, is like genuinely great. But having this thing of like keeping my army back and then just sending in this one rat and then just watching as like the walls of the city kind of like crumble as he just detonates this underground explosion and just sort of sinks part of the city. And then the rats strike is like, again, it's pure Warhammer fantasy, basically. It's real nice.
It does such a good job. Like when you defend a Skaven city, it's a massive. You fight in a giant underground cavern, and behind you, you see all the Skaven kind of warrens and like little kind of structures they've built. And you know, they've still got normal castle siege battles, but the fact they've gone to the lengths to actually create a Skaven city underground, and that has its own map that you defend differently. It's really, really cool. It's great.
Yeah, I'm really glad that this exists. It's such
it's an amazing fit of license to format, but I love that it always didn't have to be this good at it, of actually making it this kind of accessible.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it's the best Total War game they made? Like, and the fantasy setting really helps.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
It really helps them because they're not limited to the structures of history, because they could handle that certainly, but this allows them to abstract things that possibly needed abstracting, and you don't mind because it's magic. Right,
it's fun to see little things that mechanics that have worked in previous Total Wars really, really well, and see them kind of like transposed into this setting. So Black Arcs can launch bombardments into. Black Arc is basically a floating boat that is a city for the Dark Elves. They can have their own buildings on them and stuff, can't they? I think, and
it's a mobile city.
It's a mobile city, which is no other faction can do that. But if you're fighting near one, then you can. There's like a button that you press to call in a bombardment, which is an artillery strike from off the map in a Total War game, which they did before for Fall of the Samurai. It works exactly the same way, and it was super, super fun then. But I think if they go too far in that direction, it annoys their kind of the fans of historical Total War games, where it feels a little bit too gamey sometimes, and those fans really love the historical accuracy angle of it. So this is almost like the shackles are off, and okay, we can just have giant magical laser beams everywhere.
Yeah, it feels so good. And it's stuff like, it allows them to focus a little bit on the rules of things as well, without worrying about the how. So like there's a really nice mechanic, and it's pure game mechanic really. It's not really like, it is themey, but only to the extent they obviously wanted to give you this ability, where there's a Skaven army ability that's only available if you perform certain rite, and it's only for a certain number of turns, which allows you to pull this great big column of warpstone, which is the thing that's Skaven, like out of the ground in an area, quite a big area of the battlefield. And then every Skaven unit near it, regardless of what it is, gains quite a lot of anti-armor, which is very gamey, but it feels amazing because Skaven are very attritional. You have these huge mobs of quite shit rats, right? You have big mobs of shit rats, and they're coming out the ground, they're coming out the walls, they're everywhere, but they're shit. And then you drop this thing down, and suddenly they all get a lot scarier, particularly something like High Elves, where they depend on their armor quite a lot. And it feels really, really good to do. And it looks cool. A big pink rock comes out the ground. But it's something that they could never, even though it's mechanically interesting and it encourages you to set up interesting traps, you want to, when you've got that ability, and you've got that ability, you want to create the big, messy, hairball frontline where you've got loads of units compacted into a tiny place, even if that suits the defenders, because you can deploy the big rock and suddenly gain that advantage. That is something that you can't do in a traditional Total War, because it requires there's no way of explaining the fantasy of it, really, like at all. Like a Roman puts a flag down and now everyone has sharper swords. Like it doesn't work. Whereas in this setting, you can just totally do that and it's perfect.
I just realised what the sort of Skaven summoning type thing reminds me of, and it's the Necrons in Dark Crusade. Where they have loads of mechanics about like resurrection and stuff, but their sort of backstory is like they don't really go to planets; they just already are there. Yeah. They were what was there, millions and millions of years ago. And so, in particular, they're like one of their units is like they're robot skeletons, but these particular units are robot skeletons with flesh hanging off them, and they have an extra like sort of fear advantage where people are terrified of them. And those ones, instead of just pumping them out of like a factory, you can just create them wherever you want them because they're already there. They've just been lying there for millions of years. And so if you want to be over there, well, there are some over there. So just tell those ones to get up.
Yeah, they've done a nice job with the presentation of that stuff as well. So it feels right.
Yeah,
like I remember when I played quite an early build of the game. So like, imagine I can say this. Like when I played the game, Skaven didn't have textures. So it's been nice to do to see how that's all supposed to look, and a lot of the heroes didn't have animations yet, so there was a lot of just like grey seers,
T-shapes.
just sort of like no, they were in this sort of like hunched battle pose, but they would then surf like. So I'd sort of understood the game, but without having the sense of impact. And they've done a really nice job of like selling that moment, like when it's things like music as well, like when the burrow emerges, you get this kind of like and other noises and shit. There's loads of rats. Those are the 3 traditional sound effects.
Yeah, the UI is brilliant for that as well, because it shows you the kind of eruption point and then where the unit will go to.
Yeah,
and you can kind of it just makes complete sense when you're doing it, and yeah, you just nailed it really.
Yeah, the eruption point itself can be used to knock back enemies as well.
That's
if you put
good
the
advice.
eruption point underneath them, because your mouse is on
flung back.
Your mouse is where the unit will be.
Yeah,
but slightly behind your mouse is where the rats will come out. Behind your mouse is where the rats come out.
but there's like
Facts of life.
if there's a big long line of enemy units, then you disrupt one and then charge them into the next the neighbours maybe.
It's Dark Elves are cool too. We didn't mention them. They're good.
Yeah, I've not played much of them yet. I was like, I checked all their starting positions. The starting position basically tells you a lot about how exciting a campaign is going to turn out to be. And Queek's starting position is amazing. It's so much fun because there's a tiny high elf unit island nearby that's sending constant.
Yeah, those are the ones I fucked over. Yeah, I fucked them over real bad.
Yeah, they expose themselves every time they send an army over, so you're just kind of playing this waiting game.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what happened because I had somehow managed to set off a war between them and the lizard men nearby.
Oh yeah, they're a problem as well.
Yeah. And then this huge high elf army went sailing out of that island and was going straight for me. And I was like, okay, well, get back to base and wait. And it went past me to the Lizardman capital. And that's when I was like, well, fuck this.
Yeah, I'm having that island.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then they died of malaria, presumably.
There are loads of Skaven to the east of that position. It's a really
They're
good
all
campaign.
dead now.
Oh,
They're all dead now.
You just chew through them. It's so much good.
No, I didn't chew through them.
Oh,
Kroq-Gar chewed through them.
The desert man.
Yeah, and then made peace with me.
Sounds like a lizard man.
Yeah. And then made peace with me. So I was like, yep, that's cool for later.
Wow, problem solved. That problem solved itself.
Yeah, exactly. Then I nuked a different Lizard Man city, but Kroq-Gar was okay with that.
So you're Skaven, but there are enemy Skaven as well?
Yeah. Well, you can. So one thing about the Warhammer, the way Total War Warhammer works is, so believe it or not, it's not easy for everyone to be friends with everybody else in the Warhammer universe. Unlike real history, there are pretty massive obstacles to diplomacy between certain factions. It's more loose than you'd think in some ways. Like, you can have a conversation with the Lizardmen when you're a Skaven, even though they hate each other. But, like, diplomacy is a much more specific thing in Total Warhammer generally. Like, in Rome, for example, you could try and pursue a meaningful diplomatic relationship with every faction you encountered. It's not really the point of the game. Total War is always going to be a war game first, I think. It's not Civ. But, you could try that. Whereas in Warhammer, like, because of the setting, certain factions aren't going to like each other. So, and Skaven particularly kind of don't want to be friends with everybody, because if you're friends with someone, you can tell which one of their ruins are cities. So you may only make alliances with other Skaven, really, and even then, probably only to dick them over, because you do have like a reliability rating, which tells other people how other factions are more likely to make deals with you if you are very reliable and you stick. You don't break your pact. Skaven don't give a fuck about that at all, because once all the other Skaven are gone or subsumed, they're never making alliances with anybody else anyway, because everybody hates them. So, like, you basically just make alliances with the other Skaven, screw over all the other Skaven, become the biggest Skaven, and then you never click diplomacy again, because what's it for?
It's totally designed for that as well. That's why they have all those money producing buildings, because they're not a trading people. So trade is a huge source of income, obviously. That's denied to them, but the way the design pans out is that actually you get to build these money making structures in all of your cities, and that's how you counter it, basically. And they're really good at raiding. So they're like, your armies can go into stances, and if you go into raiding stances, you can steal stuff from the territory you're in. So
including your own territory.
Yeah, including if you're really desperate or for some weird reason you want to do that. But Skaven are really good at doing that, because they can generate food as well as gold, and you can put loads of points into heroes, making them better. I was going to talk for hours about this game. It is great, though. It is great.
There's so many nice mechanics, like high elves gain line of sight from trade agreements. And it's because they have a really good, very elegant spy network. So they just make a trade agreement with you. They don't mention this, but with that comes a certain amount. They know everything about your civilization now. Yeah. And they also gain a resource called influence, which allows them to basically force diplomacy through. Like you say, like, well, basically you can go along and say, well, we would like to set up a trading outpost with your people, and you go, no, because I know that's just a branch of your spy network. You don't need the money. You're high elves, and
which is actually quite realistic.
Yeah, and they go, we know, but you're going to do it anyway because we're high elves. And then they go, oh, okay. And then,
that's really cool.
That's what it simulates, because the high elves don't need trade, really. Yeah. Like, they're so wealthy. Trade is a way of finding out what everyone else is doing. Which is, that's
a cool idea.
There's lots of really neat little kind of mechanics like that. I could bang on about it as well. Like, the Dark Elves have a big issue with loyalty. Like, you have individual general loyalty now, and if that drops too low, they can break off and create splinter factions, which isn't a problem for most. So for the more kind of like orderly,
that's a Rome 2 thing. Like, it's amazing how they've picked up little ideas from other Total Wars and then made that a Dark Elf thing, which is kind of cool.
It's a Dark Elf Skaven thing, but like the Dark Elves really need to worry about it because they're constantly fucking each other over. Because they're Dark Elves, they're all hedonism bot, and like. And there's only a finite number of grapes. That's the way I would explain Dark Elf politics. And managing that's really interesting, because if you can have huge penalties, if at any point, huge loyalty penalties as Malekith, if at any point any of your other generals is higher level than Malekith. So, because they all level up through battle and stuff, but that means if you have like a favorite general and he's not you, you have to get him killed.
Can you assassinate him?
God, this is so Rome. Just without ever having played Rome Total War, just knowing some Roman history. But it's having a general who's more popular than you are is fucking dangerous.
This is Rome 2. They've just transposed it onto Dark Elves. Like, it's a perfect fit, but it's cool to watch that series.
And like, loyalty goes down if the general's bored. So a really good idea is to send one of them. Like, as soon as generals start to get quite high level, just send them to the other side of the world to raid and pillage.
This is so Rome.
Exactly. And I really like. But even in Rome, because of the stodginess of the other systems, it didn't quite come to life in this way.
Like, it never quite worked.
Whereas I do think it does. Like Dark Elves, it was a toss up between Dark Elves and Skaven for me for this first campaign. But Skaven is the one that's the most different, I think, to what previous Total Wars have done. So
and I can't wait to play more. I think it's great.
It's good.
It's good. I can't wait. This is surely going to break the game, but they're going to release a patch at some point that will unite Total War Warhammer 1 and Total War Warhammer 2.
Right.
Just to somehow glue the maps together and put all of the factions in at the same time. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Just apply game glue.
And it's
nuts.
Can't wait for that. I can't understand how that will work in my brain.
So it will disable the Vortex campaign.
Yeah, so it's
you'll basically get, at the moment you click new campaign, you just get taken through to what is basically the hub page for the Vortex campaign. A little bit like what happened with Total Warhammer 1, it'll split between Vortex campaign and Grand Map, whatever they end up calling it. Yeah. And then, because you can kind of see it now, if you zoom out all the way back on the diplomacy map, I think specifically, or even just the world map, you can see it's sort of like out to the east, it's just a sort of fog of war blob. And that's where Total Warhammer 1 is, basically.
Yes.
And then, because they did make some sort of engine changes and things, and it's a slightly better looking game than Total Warhammer 1, but it's the same assets. So they will it's like shaders and like post-processing stuff. So it can just be applied to the first game. And then it'll just be pick a faction, start somewhere in the world.
And welcome to probably the biggest Total War they've made, really.
Until they finish the trilogy.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how that works out, because in stuff like Galciv, you can have I can't remember how many races there are in that, but like 10, say, and you can have them all in the same game if you like. But I'm always wary of doing it, because what tends to happen is that one of them gets super powerful by eating the others, and by the time you encounter that one, you just have no hope. You're just boned. Whereas the campaign I'd like to play is like, I have 3 or 4 people I need to worry about. I try and be the best out of those 3 and 4. I conquer those, and then after I've conquered that, then I meet the other people who conquered their 3 or 4 or whatever, and then or even just I keep meeting the new races one after the other. And
you want a kind of Premier League pools, FA Cup pool system, where everyone defeats each other and then you go to the semi-finals.
Yeah, it feels like with so much like, for want of a better word, content. Like, so many different factions, all who work different ways and who are interestingly different to fight against. You don't want them to all kill each other off before you get there. You kind of want to have an interesting experience with each of them. But having them all in one big free-for-all is chaotic and might not be the best way to go.
One of the things that helps with that a little bit is, so even the big factions tend not to be one faction at the beginning of any given campaign. So something like the Empire is made up of all of its constituent parts, basically. And if you are playing as the Empire, your first job is to unify the Empire, whether that's politically or militarily or something like that. Same as there being lots of different Skaven clans. So you have a chance to fight everybody in different proportions, and also people are quite spread out. So there are isolated dwarven civilizations in the far west, even though the bulk of the dwarven carracks are in the old world. So, like, I think you don't just have that thing of like, well, the dwarves are gone, we're never going to see them in my campaign, they were dead by the time I got there. I think you'd probably encounter everybody on the way. But yeah, there's still a danger of like it coming down to a slug match between the two giant empires that are left and the scraps of everybody else.
I can't wait to see what happens though. I kind of love that chaos, especially as it's like a free update, and like Total Warhammer 2 is easily large enough to justify the sequel title. It's already its own.
Yeah, in a way, by releasing it this way, they're sort of ensuring that.
Yeah.
And then eventually, 3 games knitted together into one.
Blimey.
Warhammer mega game. It's very exciting. It's nice. And it's just nice that like that they've done such a good job with that license. Like that's they've
a license that has been mistreated, one might say, in by other studios.
Yeah, but
also
not
not fully realised. That's mistreated is wrong, but yeah.
Yeah, like and also specifically like given that the tabletop game has moved on from that setting, this feels like its truest realization in a format where the things that were problems for the tabletop game are successes for the video game.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's a fully realized world where you can't really add anything because every square inch of this place is populated with detailed factions and histories is brilliant for a strategy game, because by the time they get around to realizing that entire world map, it'll be like an immense feat of just detailed strategy design where you can start at any point in the world and work through hopefully to everything else. Which was a nightmare for a game that needed to change constantly.
Yeah,
a miniatures game that was struggling and was rebooted as a consequence. But it's really nice for a video game.
Yeah, I've no idea how they'd realise the infinite magical mortal realms that exist in AOS.
Yeah, well, I think AOS, it was Age of Sigmar, which came after Warhammer Fantasy, which
that's current Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah,
the equivalent.
Is a great fit for a miniatures game. In fact, the only thing that makes me sad about Total War is that the community is really against Age of Sigmar. Like,
really?
Yeah, it makes me sad.
It kind of makes sense, though. I mean, it's a nostalgic exercise in some ways.
And not in a particularly detailed way, but you see it a lot on like Total War Reddit and stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kickback against Age of Sigmar. It's like, we're the real Warhammer, not like the shit stuff that Games Workshop are doing now, which makes me sad because both are good. And it's really nice that, like, you
can like two things.
Yeah, particularly because, it's made by a pool of people that are all kind of share similar interests, right? Like, the boundaries between the sorts of people making Total War games at Creative Assembly and the sorts of people making Warhammer at Games Workshop are pretty narrow.
Lots of British designers going north and south, up and down England.
Well, I mean, like the lead designer of Total War Warhammer 2 is ex Future Publishing, so like, yeah. But yeah, we should play more Total War, basically.
Should we do questions?
Yes, we should definitely do some questions from the internet.
Good.
We don't have a lot of questions this week because we surprised everybody by recording on a Monday.
We did.
Which we might do more often because it's convenient for us. But it does mean get those questions in. Get some details on that in the end of the podcast. But nonetheless, get them in so that we don't not have questions. As is happening right now.
And we can stretch it out as long as we like, though. Watch our podcasting skills in action.
My ability to read might be impaired by the fact that we're drinking whiskey and ginger wine.
Thanks to Tony Ellis for the ginger wine.
From a PC Gamer production editor, Tony Ellis's suggestion, which is delicious, of, is it Jim Beam we're drinking?
Yep. Jim Beam and Stones.
Ginger wine, which is falling over a little bit there, Tom.
Green ginger wine. It's in a green bottle, so I can't tell if it truly is green.
It's highly drinkable, despite being essentially a whiskey and Coke, where the Coke is 13% ginger wine.
Coke is like an incredibly strong wine.
which is only Tom, Francis, and I are drinking this. So this is an interesting blind trial for
I'm
how
merely
questions go.
I'm straight Jim Beam.
Tom is sobering up on the pure whiskey.
Good. Okay, our first question comes from, well, our first two questions indeed, come from Zed Fang on Twitter, who writes, in a game, how much time is it okay to expect a player to spend trying to defeat a hard but compulsory boss? Can a game be just too hard?
For me, very, very little. I think this is definitely relevant to the Cuphead discussion where, Mark Brown was saying that GIF will tell you whether you like Cuphead or not, because it's actually like mind-blowing to me that there are people who look at that GIF and think, oh yeah, I want to play this game. To me, that GIF was like, oh my god, don't ever play this game. The only way I can look at that GIF and think this would appeal to some people is if they look at that GIF and think, oh, this idiot, I could do this way better.
I think anyone who's been watching our Bloodborne series would understand exactly how long it's okay to expect people to try and kill a hard but non-compulsory bros.
You don't have to kill the bros.
Death to bros, Tom.
Death to bros.
Do you guys, is this just me, or do you hear Bros as the name of the group? There was like a group called Bros, and I guess it was supposed to be pronounced Bros maybe, but I just always pronounce it Bros.
I always think of it as like, I used to read Mario Bros as Bros. Mario Bros.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah. So that's what I still think of Bros.
People pronounce it brothers, so does anyone say Mario Bros?
I still don't. That's correct. Head of Bros all the way.
It's Bros all the way down, but that's not what this is about. No point having a Bros fight about it.
I think there's a third way, Tom. I think there's a type of person who knows that the euphoria and the kind of the hit you get from beating a hard challenge like that is somehow worth the struggle, and that the moment of sheer joy and victory is worth it, worth chasing.
I think this is the reason it does work in Souls games, is because once you've beaten that boss, it's dead now forever. Like it's not like an arcade game. It's not like a Cuphead or a Karuga or something where beating your boss is just one step on the stage of doing the whole game. Like you can bash your head against a compulsory Dark Souls boss for a long time, but when you beat it, that's real progress made, right? Like you've really done something.
It feels like a huge moment, and the game sells it to you so well. Like it makes it feel incredible, and it doesn't even just directly reward you with good stuff. It's just the way that they explode, and then it rains blood, and it says "enemy vanquished," and you're just crying.
So yes, I don't know if this is actually a thing that I uncovered, or if someone already knows about this. But when I was editing the most recent Bloodborne video. I sped up our farming session by 6 times, including the sound, in-game sound.
Yeah.
And what I discovered is when the big enemies die, they make a really satisfying noise, like a helium balloon popping. Like it's like a pop, and it's really gratifying when they die. And in normal speed Bloodborne, you hear that as a kind of like, when they die. But sped up 6 times, it's just this kind of like, almost like Mario style, kind of like, pop. And I think that might be how they did that.
Maybe
I think they might have slowed down extremely satisfying sounds by 600 times or something.
Wow. That's kind of genius.
It is kind of genius. Seriously, watch the beginning of the Bloodborne episode just for that. Just for... Because suddenly, when you speed it up, it's like the most satisfying hammer game ever, where it's just like a man with a big hammer going bash, 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 bing! Getting loads of points for it. It's really good.
No, that's so true. Maybe like the pacing of the game is kind of revealed when you speed it up. It's almost like
it's like all Dark Souls is any other video game.
It's just Diablo,
extremely slow.
Yeah,
Diab slow.
And I love our hammer at the moment. Like we're stuck with Kirkhammer for a long period because it's unusual to use Kirkhammer for this long, but it's so satisfying to just mallet a thing very slowly.
I was trying to think, what is the longest I've spent on a boss without hating it? Like, is there any boss that I've spent a long time on? And of course, the answer is Spelunky, because Olmec is a boss that will sort of throw you for a few loops. Like, it's a rare run that you get to it if you're just starting out. And then when you do get to it, it's a totally different kind of challenge to the rest of the game. So you will die to it a few times and then you'll figure it out. And there's kind of an exploit to it. You can just kind of bypass the boss fight if you have enough bombs. And it's weird because that is the answer to the question. That is, if you ask me what's the longest I've ever spent on a boss fight without hating the boss fight, it's that. And then also there's a hell boss fight, which is different again, and it's difficult, but I completed it and didn't hate it at the end. I enjoyed the whole thing, but they're both kind of bad. Like, Olmec is just, it's such a kind of technical thing. It's just, do you know the rule? If you know the rule, you can just solve it. If you don't know the rule, you can't solve it. There is a slightly more skill-based way of solving it if you don't have enough bombs, but it's not really worth doing if you do have enough bombs. And it's so just design-wise, it's just very flabby. There's just a lot of doesn't end up being that interesting. And then the hell one, I got to it twice and I beat it on my second time. So as a boss fight, it wasn't that challenging. It is kind of cool. I like it as a just fun bit of design. So the two ones that I have spent a long time on that I did eventually get past and didn't hate, they happen to be actually pretty trivial if you really if you know what you're doing in the rest of the game.
Plus, like, the repetition there is changing the environments and the challenge every single time because it's Splunky.
Yeah.
Did you ever, you guys beat FTL's final boss?
No, I don't think I did. And I really didn't like it. That felt like changing what the game is to a dramatic extent. And so if I had a good build that was serving well through the rest of the game, I felt like I sort of deserved to win the game. And then I hit the boss and it's just like, oh shit, this just requires, I just have to have missiles, or I just have to have drones, or I can't remember what the thing was, but I just felt like there was a certain system I should have specialized in if I was going to win this fight, and I hadn't.
The other half of Zed's question is, other Cuphead question, could reviewers maybe self-report how good they are at a genre? So, for example, I can ignore reviews from people who are too good at games. It's a reasonable... Well, it's an interesting point. Like...
Yeah, I wouldn't trust anyone to self-report their skill. How do you even evaluate it?
You could self-report what difficulty you played on, I suppose. But that doesn't mean anything to anyone who hasn't played it. It was interesting to me because you and I, Chris, love Dishonored, I think probably equally. And we talked at length on this very podcast about why we love it. But I play it on easy. Yeah. I only ever play on easy. And I've tried... even just normal, like for Death of the Outsider, I thought I'll try normal this time, and like within half an hour, I'm like, no, never fucking playing this, going straight back to easy.
See, because I just finished it on, and this is not a brag, it is literally just the opposite approach on very hard.
Right.
And when I finished it, I tweeted something like, because I am still processing it, I'd quite like to do a spoiler cast or something, just to kind of talk through its beats rather than, because I would have spoken about it on this episode, but I literally have nothing to say about it that isn't a spoiler. So. But I tweeted like, I finished it and I like it, which are both true things. And I got 2 responses from people saying like, yeah, but the last mission was, I hated it and it was impossible. And like, I spent 2 hours over the last mission, but I did ghost it in the end. Like, I did manage to do a completely non-lethal ghost playthrough of the entire game, I think, in the end. And like, it's just, I think it is just, I mean, we were talking about this, Tom, but it's like being more of a Thief fan than a Hitman fan is like literally the divide there. Like,
yeah, I come from the Hitman world and you come from the Thief world. Because I think I said this to you, I don't think we were recording at the time, but I was never really a Thief guy. Like, I played that game after the fact and I quite liked it, but I've never really loved a Thief game. I mean, really, I'm a Deus Ex person, but also a Hitman person. And for me, it's all about having lots of different options and doing things in and sort of making up my own solution. And being forced into stealth is not that interesting to me. And those are the parts of with Dishonored on high difficulty, the stealth stuff is so restrictive, or not restrictive, but it's so harsh that 90% of the things I try are just nope. Fuck, I saw you from nowhere and the game's over and you got to reload. Whereas on easy, I get to kind of play around and it's like, it's more forgiving. It's like, oh, this guy's about to see you, do something about it. And I do something about it and then I get to roll with it.
Yeah, it's probably a conversation for a Dishonored pod, but like, I do think even on hard, Dishonored's AI and combat AI and sort of like the way that guards change their behavior around the map is intelligent enough to create a satisfying challenge. Like there's even though obviously the lightning bolt kind of symbol above people's heads suggests that being detected in Dishonored is a really big deal. There's quite a lot of gradations of subtlety there, I think, in that make that interesting and more interesting on higher, because all the higher difficulties do, apart from meaning you take more damage, is they make guards more aware of stuff that they should probably be aware of. For me, the reason I play it on that difficulty isn't because it's a masochistic challenge thing, it's because it makes it more realistic, and because it's a world that I am invested in. I want it to feel like there are real people occupying it, and on the highest level the guards look up sometimes. Like, you know what I mean? Whereas
can't deal with that. It's just not how NPCs ever behave.
Exactly.
It's unrealistic in the context of video games.
And that for me kind of helps me sell it, because like I don't, so you know, I ended up ghosting the final mission, but that's because of the particular way I chose to approach it. Also, Semblance is fucking amazing. Semblance allows you to ghost so many situations that you would never previously be able to ghost. Like being able to ghost it while reading every book about the Outsider, that requires Semblance, as far as I can tell. But actually, that's not quite ghosting it, because you have to choke someone out to use Semblance. You know what I mean? The kind of non-lethal, never detected kind of playthrough.
Yep.
Pillow, let's call it. He's not a ghost, but you smother some people that like just sort of an immensely satisfying thing to do when you know that you're up against a kind of real AI-ish that will actually look for you, rather than knowing that it's pretending not to see you. I think that's the thing that bothers me. Is on easy is knowing that the game is pretending that it can't see me.
I never had that feeling. It does have. We talked before about like the easy mode still does have sort of, I don't know exactly if there are any AI features they turn off, but things like if there's a patrol and you take out one of the guards quietly without the other one seeing, the other guard will still, when he comes back, notice the other guard is gone and say, hey, what happened, and look around and stuff. So it's not like, to me, it didn't feel like playing in GIMP mode or anything. It was just, the number one thing was just, if someone does see me, I want a little bit of warning so I can do something about it. Otherwise, It's just reload a save game, and I find that less immersive than...
My thing is always that difficulty, basically, with that sort of game especially, increases the amount of time it takes me to get somewhere, because I just have to think about more stuff and just take more stuff into account, which is great. But I'm so impatient, especially the first time I go through a world. It's like I don't have to do the maximum amount of admin to get to that place. I just want to see the stuff. I still don't put it down too easy, because I do enjoy the combat. I do enjoy like being punished for being spotted, and also the combat's quite fun in this one.
Yeah, I think the actual like damage values are relevant to me, because if I get spotted, I just reload. I never play it through. So pretty much, if any damage ever killed me, that would be fine. That wouldn't affect my playstyle, because if I take damage, I reload.
It's almost like that's a key mechanic in every game you've made.
Oh yeah.
But I'm quite happy to slaughter a courtyard full of guards in hand-to-hand sword combat. It feels wrong on some level, but if that means I get to see
actually, every now and then. So I generally don't carry on if I take damage, but every now and then if I'm spotted and I happen to pull it off in a stylish way, I had one thing where I just like, I thought the city was basically clear of guards. I thought I'd kind of taken them all out. And I was going back to the pub in Death of the Outsider, and I kind of sprinted up there, and there's two people talking outside the pub, civilians, and I sprinted straight to the front door, and it turns out there's a guard at the front door, and they immediately saw me, and I immediately saw them, and I just hit fire, and that just caused like a lethal takedown animation, just kind of slit their throat. And I was just seemingly outside of the vision cones of both the people standing right next to us, talking to each other. Like they were looking at each other, so perpendicular to what was happening. And I had just like sprinted in, vaulted over a wall, run up to this guard, just slit their throat, and then just suddenly looked at them like, okay, I'm going in.
I think to the question, like, if I were reviewing Death of the Outsider with this in mind, I don't think I would review from the point of view of players in exactly the way I do. Like, the kind of, provenance of options is the important thing there, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, so on paper, I kind of agree that, it's helpful to know how a reviewer approaches a game, and if they approach it like you do, and if they're as familiar with the genre as you do, and whether they have fun. But I don't know that you necessarily need to disclose that in terms of like a skill level, so much as it should come across in the way you write about a game. Really, ideally, like, and you should either approach it from a kind of holistic view, you try and take in the experiences of lots of different people, or you write about a game with, for example, like if I read a review of a fighting game by someone who really knows their fighting games, even though like I'm a kind of enthusiastic novice to that stuff, I can tell what their skill level is. They don't need to disclose it. Like, just the successful use of big words is enough to convince me that they know more than I do. I'd love to read the review where someone wrote something that really sounded like an expert assessment of the fighting game, then confessed in the last paragraph they know nothing at all about fighting games.
Just mash the buttons.
Exactly. That would be interesting. But you know what I mean? Like, I feel like this is the sort of thing you can get across through the way you choose to express yourself about a game, rather than needing to
People
literally
don't read now, Chris. They don't read the words.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
I think actually all of our discussions today have reinforced the fact that multiple difficulty levels and a wide range of difficulty levels in games is almost always a good thing for players.
Yeah, like I would say that now. Like I am totally like I was a hard mode or bust guy on every game, and now I am basically situational about that. Like
It's actually one of my favorite sort of developments in game design in the last sort of 5 years has been that it's pretty. I think now it's basically the default that you can change the difficulty during the game. And there was a time when that was absolutely not true. It was like 90% of games, you pick a difficulty at the start and you're just stuck with it. And if you're wrong about guessing that, you just screwed your whole campaign. And you won't know for a while because the start of the game is easier than the rest of the game.
It's a total guess as well. There's no way you could possibly know. Like, I had this thing with skill, like on the character selection screen for Divinity, gives you like loads of skill rundowns. I was like, this is meaningless to me. Unless I've played the game for 10 hours, I'm not going to
no way of knowing what this means.
this is meaningful for your second run.
Yes.
Like
Yeah. So that was like a design goal for Heat Signature was I want you to choose difficulty every time you take a mission, not when you start the game, but just any time, basically before every level, you say, I want an easy, like I just did a medium level, that was too hard, I want an easy one now.
Heat 6 is actually an interesting example for this, because I pick Heat Signature missions not based on the difficulty, but based on the guard gear.
Yeah.
Because that tells me a lot. Okay, that's an interesting thing, because we were speaking in the break, actually, about how Heat 6 difficulty levels, you were saying, Tom S., about mapping to sort of the amount of time a mission will take. I think I started approaching it slightly differently in terms of almost like how much stress it will cause. Because of all of the different sort of special gear that guards can have, like, shields and armor are the two kind of absolute, like, go, don't go kind of things, really. Like, if you can't deal with them, it's going to be difficult, right? Like, unless you do something very clever.
Shields are amazing, though.
Yeah. Whereas, like, the situational shields, I forgot what they're called. You'll know. You made the game.
Emergency shields.
That's the one. They, them and bombs.
Explosive guards, I guess. I don't know what that is.
Teleporting guys.
Glitch dash.
Okay. The red ring thermal men.
Heat sensors.
All of those things.
Should have called them red ring thermal men, really. Red ring thermal men signature.
All of those things I'll create like a wrinkly challenge rather than just like a brick wall, right? And I think it's good that the game has both of those things, because but it feels like shields and armor are specifically like gear gateways, like whereas the others are like, you can work around this. Like, I think I told you this, Tom, like the day after the game came out, I had a run where it was technically a hard mission, but for some reason everybody had glitch dash. So, and they were all armed with wrenches. So the game had obviously decided this was hard, but what it meant was whenever I was detected, and I had like a silenced rapid fire shotgun on this character, whenever I was detected, every guard in the level would just teleport next to me, like willingly, and I would just unload with the shotgun. And so I just sprinted through the entire level. I think the other reason it was hard is it was like 15 seconds until capture. If you it was like super, super short timing. But some luck of layout meant that I could just sprint towards the pilot to kill the pilot and stop the timer, while every guard in the level just sort of willingly teleported next to me. And then pause and shoot and pause and shoot and run and pause and shoot, and then got to the end and did it.
That's awesome if you have a short blade as well, because the short blade is very short range weapon, but you just hold the button down and you just kill everyone who comes near you. It's incredibly fast to recover. And so if they have glitch dash and they're melee, they glitch dash to you thinking, oh, an intruder, I will get as close as I can because I'm a melee guard. And then when they get there, you're like, I'm better at this than you. I just have to hold this button down, and however many of you come, you will all die.
That's what I mean. It's like, obviously, I can understand all the reasons why that was sorted into the hard category by the game in terms of reward and stuff. But looking at the upgrades, I had that feeling like, this is going to be a fun one. This is going to be,
Yeah, I kind of wanted that. I wanted you to think about what you have and what they have, basically. You know, the difficulty levels that we give you are just a rough guideline. And if you see one that says mistake, you should think, oh, if I have 0 equipment, I probably can't do this. But everything in between, anything that is remotely in your anywhere near the difficulty level you can normally cope with, yeah, you should be looking at the specifics and saying, that was the whole idea, is like, look at what specifically you're going to be challenged with, and do you have the equipment to get past that. The armor and shields thing, they are different to the other things because it's a bit of a hybrid approach. Like, it started out as, I wanted to come up with guard modifiers that would mean you can't do this mission unless you have specialist equipment, because that was the personal mission concept. Was your personal mission will be a thing that like a heist movie where you have the blueprints for the vault or whatever, and you're like, okay, we just simply cannot do this unless we have a safecracker and an acrobat and someone who can get past this guard and someone who can get past this retina sensor or whatever. And so the idea was like, we'll tell you what's on your ship, and then you go out and figure out what things you need to get past it.
A little bit like Invisible Ink, actually. That.
Yeah, so like we got as far as shields and armor, and then very quickly I realized this is the wrong fit for this game, because the whole type of game I'm trying to make is one where you invent your solution. If I make one where to get past thing X, you need thing Y, I'm just telling you what the solution is, and it's not going to be interesting. It's going to be like just puzzle solving, or even worse, just grinding. You just have to go and get the thing that you need to solve this mission. And so that's still somewhat in there with armor and shields. There are things that get past armor and the things that get past shields, but there's also a lot of wiggle room between that and everything else, where every other type of guard kit is, you know, challenging in some way but easy in another way. And armor and shields, if there are not too many of them, you can kind of muddle through and you can still figure it out. And that's kind of why you need money for your personal mission now, because gating it by equipment just meant that I was dictating how you solve the mission, and that was just defeating the whole point of the game. The whole point of the game is you invent your solution. So it had to be just money. It had to be just like, I need this to be a thing you work towards, and once you have, we will present like I say, I think they still do work, armor and shields. It's good to have some kind of hard challenges. I recognize this. I've talked about this in like why I love Deus Ex. There are some things in Deus Ex where it's just, I cannot solve this problem without tool X. And that's why it was so interesting that I had to solve it with tool Y. Like, I just didn't have tool X, and so I had to do something crazy to get past this sentry, because that nothing I had could do anything about it.
I think that's like I think that's right. Like the reason that having those absolute barriers works from like a kind of skill point of view is, without them, I think you would end up having this sort of devolution towards like extremely simple solutions to every problem. Like, you'd end up with, like, you know, it would probably be slightly different every time, but it would be like if you have some variant on Swapper, Visitor, Sidewinder. Is it Sidewinder?
Yeah.
Yeah, the slow-mo thing. The answer to every problem becomes do one of those things to get into an advantageous physical position, then shoot a gun into the room, and then you've won. And it doesn't really matter what combination of gun and those upgrades it is. There's going to be a million of them that work, but they'll functionally amount to roughly the same thing, with a few little tweaks where, like, swording somebody who will blow up is not a good idea. And that's about it. But that's about it, genuinely, from a sort of complexity point of view.
Yeah.
As soon as you have functionally invulnerable guards, unless you've got a plan for them, that plan doesn't work enough that that's the only way you play the game. So, yeah. I don't know where I'm going with this other than good job, Tom.
Thanks.
But yeah, and I don't really know how we got onto this from should game journalists divulge how good they are at games.
I mean, I should if I reviewed a heat signature.
Yes.
Among the many things I have to disclose, one of them would be I've played this before.
We should. We should. I know the developer. We should move on to quickly because it's relevant to Ben's question, which is: Hello, crates and crowbars. Quick question for Tom F. Do you read reviews for your games, and if so, what is your favourite thing that you've seen written about one of your games? Thanks, Ben.
Well, actually, in general terms, yes, I have. But this time, no. I've not read any reviews of Heat Signature. I've looked at scores, and that's good. And I feel encouraged by that. And I've looked at sales figures, which are very important in terms of my continued survival and ability to make more games. And then I'm faced with, like, launch night, you don't really have time to. Like, there's so much going on. And then after launch night, it's like, okay, well, I saw the sales graph and it went up by this much, and that's really good. And I'm excited about that. And the beautiful thing about sales graph is it only goes up. It never goes down. Just like the daily sales go down for sure, but like the total number of copies you've sold just keeps going up. It can't really, if enough people refunded it, it probably could go down, but that never in practice happens. And so that's a place I can go to where I'll only ever have good news. Like, I can have slightly less good news than yesterday, but it will still be good news. Whereas reviews, if I go there, there's a chance someone will criticize it in a way that really bothers me. And I just, it's a complete cliche, but, anytime you put something out there, if you get 10 compliments and one criticism, the criticism will haunt you for days and the compliments will just fade from your memory immediately. And that's absolutely true for me. And so I'm in this place where, like, because it sold well, I feel great and I'm really happy. And like this 3.5 years paid off, and I feel relieved and fantastic. And I know if I read reviews that had any kind of criticism, even if it was mild, I would just be like, oh God, fuck, I screwed it up. And that's obviously not true because people are enjoying it. Like their user review percentage is incredibly high. But any responsible review will mention criticisms, and I don't want to hear the criticisms right now. I just want to live in the world where it was fine. But I do still have some because I have read things people have read about them. I have read things people have written about it. It's difficult at this stage. I do have some favourites. Both from games journalists, both from friends of mine, and both making a similar point. First was Rich McCormick, formerly of PC Gamer, who now works for
The Verge?
17-bit.
Yes, thank you.
Smooth.
He's a producer for 17-bit now.
Yeah.
I was going to say the Galaxy guys because I couldn't remember if it was 13-bit or 17-bit because odd numbers of bits are a common
It's definitely 17-bit.
naming convention.
Funnily enough, he's just started doing some stuff for Richard's just started doing some stuff. Sorry, fucking hell.
I'm glad it's not just
ginger
me.
wine and whiskey, everybody.
I'm still
for
fine,
RPS.
guys.
Oh, cool.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, he's doing like a early access thing or
Yeah.
no, an updates thing.
So what you and I, Tom, should do is write something for RPS in the same week of Rich, just so we can have a brief moment of the PC gamer circa 2012 era gang.
He was reflecting
Sans
that,
senior.
having read some Heat Signature reviews, he was reflecting that I had made a game that forced games journalists to write the way I used to write as a games journalist, which is experiential
finally
stuff,
done that,
recounting experiences and stories, which is what I love to do. And Phil Savage on the PC Gamer podcast said he described it as a Tom Francis simulator, which is I don't think of my life as being anything like the life that you live in Heat Signature, but he explained to say that like I'm not that conscious of this, but apparently the way I play games is not how everyone plays the games, and sort of self-imposed rules and coming up with like concepts of like, oh, this character will never kill unless this happens. is not that common. And Phil was saying that he thought Heat Signature was a game that made you play that way, even if you don't normally play that way. And that wasn't, I didn't really sort of set out to do that exactly. I just made a game that, I would want to play. But yeah, both those things were highlights of the reaction to Heat Signature, because if I can do anything to make people enjoy games in the way that I enjoy games, then that's great. And yeah, like I say, I sort of assumed everyone else was also playing Deus Ex in ways with like complex self-imposed rules about they can kill people but not directly, and only if turrets kill the people. And I do occasionally hear from people saying, "Oh yeah, I liked your story, but when I play the game, I don't get that at all." And so if my game has encouraged those people to play that way, then that's great.
I've taken the lore of Heat Signature very seriously, Tom.
I think, again, this was kind of serendipity more than intent, but the sort of very light touch stuff about, oh, this guy's your brother or this guy's your son, and your starting equipment, they were meant as prompts. I did intend for that to sort of cue some things in your head, but I didn't really expect it to work. I sort of thought like, oh, players like me will get that, but that's like 10% of people. But in practice, I've heard from loads of people who are like, oh, because I started this equipment, I assume my character had this idea, and I went out and did this.
Again, we were talking about this in the break. Starting with a wrench means you were an engineer of some kind. There's no other way you'd come into ownership of a wrench. Like, yeah, it's nice, and it's a really good testament to how light touch storytelling can be. Like, I think there's a tendency to overwrite. I say that as a writer. Like
somebody. So when you get a character captured, there's there's not even really a chance. You just get the next time you at the character select screen, you get a character who is a relative or friend or a relation of theirs in some way, who is trying to rescue them, and it's random what their relationship is. They could be a friend, they could be a partner, they could be a spouse, they could be brother or sister, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. And it's just a list of relationships in a random choice. And somebody managed to what did they have? They had a situation where they had already played as that person's dad, and then that person had rescued that character and then either retired or got themselves killed. Then they played as that character again, because if you rescue them, you get to play as them again, and then got themselves captured again. And then they got like another dad or it was another person who said that it was their kid, and they were like, oh, how can they have two dads? And I was like, well, maybe one of them's their mother. Did you think about that? And we intentionally leave gender very ambiguous in Heat Signature, and also just relationships very ambiguous in general. And some people have pointed out, well, someone like had a situation where like two different parents had rescued the same person, and they're like, oh, if I get captured again, do I get a third parent? And knowing how the algorithms work, I thought secretly, yes, you probably will. And then narratively thought, yes, and what's wrong with that?
My first character was captured and then rescued by the second character, who I kind of decided, I think was her girlfriend. And then that created a kind of amazing, because my first character I picked because she had like a long sword and a gun, which were like the two things I wanted.
Excellent.
And then the second character who I picked because she could rescue the first character, I had a long sword and a short sword. And that sort of suggested to me how they met.
Clashing longswords.
Oh, it's longsword club, right? They both go to longsword club. There's a disagreement about guns versus sword for your right mouse button. But that initial disagreement turns into a relationship that's able to spur a galaxy-spanning rescue quest, which was ultimately successful. Even though she ended up succeeding thanks to the help of an extremely good shotgun.
Just coming to see the virtues of other methods now.
Yeah, indeed. We have a question from Michael, who writes, with the recent release of Cuphead, fruity semicolon, are there any other time periods in history that you want immortalized in shmup form, or as he writes it, shumpformer, which I assume is a typo.
I mean, Cuphead isn't set in a period of history. It's the slight problem with the
the
question.
cartoon period of history.
Yeah,
Like when everyone's heads are made of cups.
You know, like
everyone bobbed up and down in time.
we all went to school. We all watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit to learn about how this all panned out.
I do remember
think
being
period
worried.
of art or creative history is probably the charitable
I would
reading there.
I would play a shmup that was depicted in Egyptian hieroglyphics,
That's a good idea.
like a very constrained horizontal plane.
So-
there's a game. There's a kind of 2-dimensional combat RPG based on urn art.
Yeah,
Aztez.
No,
No.
Aztez also exists,
it's
Fuck.
but I think that's not.
it's not this one. Oh no, Tom!
Someone almost said it.
Apotheon.
Yeah,
Apotheon.
What's Aztez? What have I said?
Aztez is a black and white fighting game that is based on. It is based on like sort of Central American art, I think. I guess probably Aztec influences. But it's made by someone who's an expert in fighting games and like sort of hyper competitive, like Street Fighter type things, whose name escapes me right now. But the surprising thing about it is it came out quite recently, I think. It's been in development for many years. And the thing that surprised me is it hasn't like a strategy game meta layer where you are trying to like conquer certain cities and things, and then like the maybe the audaciousness of what you're trying to do on the strategy map maps to how difficult the beat 'em up game you're playing is when you go into the thing. But it's all about for its kind of like, to give you an idea of what it focuses on, it's all about selling the impact of like giant sweeping sword attacks on like 7 different dudes and knocking them up into the air and then hitting them 17 times before they fall back down.
Nice, that's good.
Because every time you hit them, it suspends you in the air and also keeps them in the air and all that stuff. I think it's black and white except for the blood, and the blood is red.
I'd love to play a Mobius game. Again, it's based entirely on the art of Mobius. That'd be nice.
I was being in Italy, in Milan specifically. I was, and being in Milan specifically on the day that a Caravaggio exhibit opens. I was sort of surrounded by. I didn't make it into the Caravaggio exhibit because it was a really long queue, which is always nice to see, but nonetheless. But like Milan Cathedral is a beautiful kind of Gothic edifice, like literally just encrusted with saints, like just covered in saints.
Just fucking lousy with saints. I can't get them off
It was
me.
it just up to your eyeballs.
Just like saints, shitty saints coming out of the earth, swarming tourists.
Yeah. Just the fuck. I can't say the word beneficence while be this drunk. Like the beneficence below, just like they just burst out of the ground like, and then distract your cannoneers. But nonetheless, that I think made me just sort of rekindle my enthusiasm for really baroque. Oh shit! Not my microphone. Catholic kind of Gothic art, and that kind of thing. That would be a fun environment to set a shmup in. Bayonetta gets some of the way there, but Bayonetta is also kind of like Dayglow hyper camp kind of magic adventure at the same time, which is obviously wonderful because it's one of my favorite games, but it's not the kind of brooding kind of Caravaggio-esque kind of all heavy shadow and kind of sad John the Baptists that I would want from this shmup in my mind.
I want to play a side-scrolling shooter set in a John Constable painting where it's sort of just fucking blurry and weird. It's just a couple of people dragging a boat up a canal.
As somebody
Shooting a peasant
as somebody
every now
who
and then.
spent my teenage years drinking quite a lot of cider in Salisbury,
Right.
a very blurry side-scrolling John Constable painting is basically what that was.
It's worth remembering that, like, there's a video game of Dante's Inferno.
Oh, Christ.
Oh yeah, it is, yeah.
They just went ahead
Maybe I
and made
don't
that.
want that thing I just said.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't want it at
A
all.
cautionary tale, perhaps. What's it called? Dante's Inferno?
Dante's Inferno.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was called Dante's Inferno.
I love
By
that.
Visceral Games.
Brilliant. There's a really
Smorgasbord Games.
a wonderful. Oh God, I hope I get his name right. Italian artist, comic book artist I love called I think it's Francesco Toppi. It's definitely Toppi, but his style is astonishing and deserves to be ripped off in game form, I think.
That's a good point. Actually, yeah, well, if we're talking about comic book artists, if we're talking about art styles, I would like someone to make a Mike Mignola.
I'm not familiar with Mike Mignola.
Hellboy.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
That'd be good. Yeah. I have no deeper thoughts on that. I just thought that. Our final question comes from An Angry Barnacle, who writes, if you could wipe your memories of select games in order to experience them anew, which games would you want to see for the first time again? Do you erase long-time favourites or keep the memories you already have, as an older game likely hasn't held up very well? My first picks would probably be Hyper Light Drifter, Dishonored 2, and Alien Isolation.
My first thought was Half-Life 2. I don't know. I don't feel like it would age too badly. I don't think there's a lot of stuff that it does. I don't know, actually. My enjoyment of it was... a big part of that was the fidelity. Like, it was unprecedented at the time. It was like, holy shit, this is a real place. I've never seen a place like this before. And, you know, like Doom 3 existed and Far Cry existed. Far Cry was beautiful, but it was very exotic and kind of wild location. Doom 3 was just, you know, space corridors. And like really well rendered space corridors. But then Half-Life 2 just felt like its choice of place was more convincing. It was just like more real world, and so the fact that it also rendered it beautifully and had so much like physics going on, more so than either of those other two games, made it more real, and that was a lot of what contributed to my amazement at it. So I guess like if it's literally I only erase my memory of that and then I re-experience it, maybe that wouldn't be so great because I would remember all the other things that have come since, and physics would no longer blow my mind and all that stuff.
Yeah, the question makes a good point about, you know, the thing existing in its context and that being the magic, especially if it's formative. So, like, I could play Final Fantasy VII again, but I'm not 12, so it would not be anywhere near as fun, and I wouldn't forgive it for its many problems in a way that I would now.
So my thought for this is I would erase Bastion.
Oh yeah,
And the reason for that is because I think its art style obviously holds up because it's a 2D art style.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful, but it would look as good today as it did when it came out.
Yep.
But also, it really surprised me when it came out, and I think it probably has retained that capacity to surprise, which I think is what we're talking about, right? Like, I wouldn't erase my memories of Half-Life 2 because my memory of Half-Life 2 is of literally like playing the game for 20 minutes and then closing it down and then starting it again and rushing to get my dad and my sister so that I could show them because it was so mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And that is an experience you can probably only have once and can only have when you're 12, right? Like, that's, you know, I would never want to get rid of that. Similarly, any other kind of technologically groundbreaking game you can think of. Whereas I think Bastion springs to mind as an example of a game where the storytelling, the music, the art, the way it all kind of fit together, the notion of this narrator that kind of followed you around, those things would still be novel, I think, today. And be just as rewarding to discover. Like, the kind of... I love that soundtrack, for one thing, but, like, the level where you just sort of spiral in on a singer is such a kind of wonderful piece of design and kind of discovery in the sense of, like, you're part of this kind of unfolding story. And that's something you can really only experience for the first time once, obviously, because of how time works. But that's something where I think it wasn't an epochal shift, but it's an experience that I would meaningfully get
the same
something
again,
out of getting the same again. Like, one more of those, please.
Yeah, I think Alien Isolation is an interesting shout in the question because I think it's harking back to a point before you understand the AI algorithm by which the creature is working, and it actually refreshes that again. So that's an interesting, different take on it, where you're not experiencing this linear, beautiful, artistic thing, but you're simply unlearning the things that, you know, learning how that thing works eventually does diffuse its kind of menace and diffuse its...
I guess actually Left 4 Dead would be an interesting choice.
Oh yeah.
Like the first experience with Left 4 Dead were just like, I can't believe there's a game like this. This is incredible. I guess rather selfishly, I would love to just play one of my games without knowing anything about it, which is totally impossible. Like the most 100% impossible thing.
That must be the curse, right? Like you've made games for yourself. But
I mean, luckily, so Gunpoint was still somewhat fun for me by the end of it because it's a little bit open-ended. There's some flexibility you can do. And then Heat Signature is much more so. Like I still enjoy playing Heat Signature now, which is not at all true at the end of Gunpoint. At the end of Gunpoint, like I never want to play this fucking thing ever again. Burn it in a fire, please.
Don't do that, guys. Don't do that.
Whereas Heat Signature, it's because it's so randomized and so generative. It's the whole point of it was trying to make a game that I could continue to play. And I don't know how people can make like completely defined linear narrative things by the end of it. I mean, like, you know, I guess I've heard them say this. They just hate it at the end of it. There's no secret. It's not like there's some trick you can do to still love the thing at the end of it. They just hate it at the end of it because it's a finite thing and you worked on it for 3 years or whatever and now you hate it. Whereas, you know, that it got me down a little bit with Gunpoint. Like, there was a lot of it I didn't like. A lot of it was just totally dead to me. You know, solving the puzzles was dead to me because I've done it a million times. And Heat Signature has no trace of that. There's nothing in it that I've done a million times. And that's such a more positive experience. And yeah, I would like to do that more. But yeah, I still don't know what it would be like. It may even be a negative thing because to some extent, if you make a sufficiently randomized game, then the good stuff, if you do your job perfectly, the good stuff would be the thing that is different every time. So you're still getting that fun. And then the bad stuff would be learning how to play the game. And that's the thing that if you reset your memories, you would struggle with. And so I wouldn't be surprised if you reset my memories and I played Heat Signature, I'd be like, oh, fucking hell, this is annoying. Why does it work like this? What idiot designed this?
Why can you teleport things from anywhere on a ship?
It doesn't make any sense.
I love discovering geography in games, like actually, you know, getting the hit of a new area and slowly unpacking it.
Yeah.
So any like Skyrim, I'd love to.
Yeah,
do
I was about to.
scratch.
As soon as you started saying that, I thought, hang on, I would erase Skyrim.
I would erase Skyrim because that's a game that quickly, well, not quickly breaks, but it breaks. Like the kind of framework of it breaks.
But I remember that really vividly. It's like Skyrim came out the month I started at PC Gamer. I just hit the cable that connects the microphones to the thing.
Can you still hear us?
The waveform
Seems
is moving,
right,
so we're going with yes.
Yay!
Wow. It's one of those podcasts. So the Skyrim came out the month I started at PC Gamer, and I sank so deep into it. Like, that was when I was like sleeping on your couch, Tom S.
Oh yeah.
During the week, and then going back to my parents' house on weekends, and then I was just playing Skyrim, and it was this kind of amazing unfolding environment full of crazy adventures. Like, you wrote that review that month, Tom F. It's annoying that you're both called Tom and having a conversation like this, but like, and you know, it was like such a kind of, it felt boundless, right? And then years on, that game has been so reliably kind of mined out and sort of modded and refurbished and changed and altered that it feels so limited now. Like, I can't go back to Skyrim and ever kind of reclaim the same experience of it.
You see its boundaries now.
Yeah, like, I know its limitations. I know how its engine works. I know, like, I had a 120-hour adventure in that game, and it's absolutely irrecoverable because even if I start a new character, I feel like I'm back at the start of a journey I know the steps of and the rules of very well.
Definitely.
So maybe that's a really good choice, actually. I would happily erase Skyrim from my mind.
Yeah. I was thinking about it, like, I'm just about 2,000 to Zelda now, and I would erase that game from my mind right now. Like, right now.
What's Breath of the Wild?
Breath of the Wild, and just play it again from the start, with the one iota of knowledge that the initial plateau is not what the game is, really.
Yeah.
With that one bit of knowledge, I'd love to rediscover everything I've discovered and all the little adventures I've had. Just the tiny little, Like,
is it because that game is secretly fucking phenomenal?
Yeah, but I think that once I don't want to. It's like a great book. It's like I don't want to finish it. I don't want to finish it because that means it's it's not going to be happening anymore. And this isn't going to happen for another like 5 years. There isn't going to be another one of this sort of caliber game for a long time, you know.
Yeah, it's weird. The thing about like erasing your original memories of it. I mean, my initial answer was Half-Life 2, but realistically, no, I wouldn't say that, because my memories of that are
precious.
It was just perfect. It was one of the most exciting moments of my life. It sounds crazy, but like there's been no game since then that I've been that excited about.
Yeah, I pretty agree with
and
that.
it lived up to everything. There was no sense of disappointment. It was 100% what I wanted. And yeah, there have been many games since where I've been really sure it's going to be great, and it has been great, but there hasn't been that like kid on Christmas Eve feeling.
I wonder if that's why Half-Life 3 meant so much to so many people as a concept.
Try and recapture.
Yeah, we don't,
because the jump from, because Half-Life 1 was amazing. Like, let's not forget that. Like, Half-Life 1 was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And then Half-Life 2 was an equivalently amazing experience on top of Half-Life 1. It's very rare that a game does that.
Yeah.
And to me, it feels like there was an age where technological jumps forwards were joined by creative leaps forwards as well. Yeah. And when you got those two at once, that was what created that. Like, oh my god, I've just never experienced anything like this. You know, Half-Life 2 was a mixture of just the fidelity of the world, plus the fidelity of the characters in particular. Like the sort of digital acting was way beyond anything I've ever seen. But then also there was some interaction stuff that we've never seen before, like physics. That was just like, and so it was like all of the flash and pizzazz of a big new fidelity leap forward, but also the gameplay stuff. There was enough new there to convince us that this was like, oh my god, I can do things in this game I can never do before. And we don't really have that these days because like physics is solved. That exists already. You can go with the clever new mechanic. Like you make an FPS that looks as good as Half-Life, and when you press the right mouse button, something crazy happens that's never happened ever before, to do with time or gravity or whatever.
It's usually time or gravity.
It's usually time or gravity, particularly in indie games. But it'll never really be like that because this was like all of the world had not existed in this way before. There was just things didn't have physics on them before. Now they do, and physics is just a thing. Everything does it now. I think the way Valve see it is that VR is the next leap forward like that, and that and it's true. If you have a good VR experience versus a good screen experience, is that kind of leap forward. It is like, oh my god, I'm in this place to a degree that I've never experienced.
If
before.
You measured games by like things I've shown my mum, it would go like Half-Life 2 and then a 10-year gap and then VR. I say a 10-year gap, I mean an 18-year gap apparently.
So you can see why they're excited about it.
I still think like the substantial, almost like, I don't know, software gameplay gap is still AI for me. Like, that's one of the things that really excites me about Zelda. Even though the AI is very basic, it's like far beyond, for the most basic enemies, far beyond what will happen to you, what they will attempt to do in any other game I've played for ages. Just like the basic goblin things, which are called moblins, they get smarter as you go through the world. They're different colours, like they get stronger, they get better weapons, but they also just learn new tricks. So they throw bombs back at you. They start kicking bombs away from the group. Like they start doing things that, makes complete sense. And when you see them do it for the first time, it feels like a revelation. I was like, holy crap, they've defended themselves with a basic level of intelligence that I've not experienced in a game before, really. Especially in an open world context, in just an open random part of the world where they're navigating terrain organically, and they're defeating threats like that using the physics systems by kicking stuff away from themselves. Like that's so basic, you would think, just to describe it in that way, but I can't think of any other game that does it.
Like, I feel like we're struggling a little bit towards the fact that I would love to do a dedicated Zelda cast at this point, but I feel like we might be better off just burying it in a dozen episodes of the Crate and Crowbar where we bring up Zelda as an example
for 5 minutes at a time,
how to fix PC games, basically, because like holy
it's crazy.
Like that stuff, like the fact that if you that they will dynamically find weapons, like that they will go and look for weapons on the environment based on what's been dropped, like,
and they can use each other's weapons. There's no like there are a few size restrictions, like a little guy's not going to lift up a massive weapon, but there's no kind of there's nothing kind of really binary about what a thing can or can't pick up outside of that. Like a skeleton could pick up another skeleton's arm and try and hit you with it. Like it's that level of stuff. It's
like imagine how revelatory it'd be in your game of Diablo if you wiped out a big room full of monsters and all the loot fell, and then one of the little surviving goblins picked up the amazing sword that the boss had just dropped and ran at you with it. Like that would feel like some kind of crazy, amazing evolution on what that genre was about.
But it's not outside the scope of current technology, and
it's not.
It hasn't been for a decade, I'm sure.
I know,
honestly.
But nonetheless, Zelda apparently was the game that would eventually get that right. So, yeah, I don't know how we ended up on that from games you would erase from your memory, but
that was a good question.
That's a good question, man. But that is all of the questions we've got time for this Monday evening. If you would like to send us a question for a future episode, you can do so by emailing us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also tweet us at crateandcrowbar. Crate and Crowbar is very, very kindly supported by our Patreon backers. If you'd like to find out more about supporting the podcast and its side projects, you can do so at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. You can also check in with us on YouTube at youtube.com/Crate and Crowbar, where you'll find the Bloodborne playthrough and YouTube versions of all of our pods and that kind of thing. If you'd like to hang out with our community, you can do so on Discord. Best place to do that is on Discord, which you would access. Anyone's going to fuck something up. You can access via the website. If you look on the top bar, there's a link to Discord. There'll also be a link in the show notes to this very episode. It's a rad community full of amazing people and lots of good channels. Talk about everything from TV to games to tabletop games to miniatures to heat signature. There's a dedicated channel for Tom's Game.
Literally called Tom's Game.
Called Tom's Game. Go there to talk about Tom's Game. That is all of the plugs and things. If you'd like to follow us individually on Twitter, I'm at CThurston. That's CTHURSTEN. Tom F.
Is Pentadact at PENTADACT.
S.
Tom Senior at PCG Ludo, which is LUDO.
Thanks for listening, everybody.